Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michele Avila. Michele Yvette Avila, people often call her Missy, was born on February 8, 1968, and grew up in Arleta, Los Angeles, with her mother and 3 brothers. She attended San Fernando High School, where she met her 2 best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Michele and Karen's close relationship began in childhood, but the two grew distant during high school. Michele was known for her beauty and impressive long hair, which made her popular and well-liked among her peer group. Karen and Laura began to feel jealous because Michele received a great deal of attention from others, especially boys. During Michelle's sophomore year, a rumor began to spread that she had relationships with many boys, all of whom had their own girlfriends. This rumor angered a group of girls who confronted Michele outside the school. They brutally attacked her when she returned home. As a result of this brutal act, her attackers were brought to justice. The leader of the group was reported to be Sonia Bon. Michele's parents immediately reported the ringleader of the attack. Michele was scheduled to testify in court on October 8, 1985, but unfortunately, she never made it to court. In early September, Michele had an argument with Karen and Laura, 2 of her close friends. The conflict arose from a rumor that had been circulating for over a year, accusing Michele of having an affair with the boyfriend of one of them. Michele then began dating a man named Randy at the start of her junior year, but their relationship lasted only about a month before she decided to end it. The reason for the breakup was Randy's constant partying, which Michele could no longer tolerate. However, after breaking up with Michele, Randy began dating Karen, and the 2 even moved in together after just a month. Despite this, Randy seemed to still have feelings for Michele, as he frequently flirted with her, which made Karen unhappy. Michele rejected Randy and informed him that she did not want to rekindle their relationship. Wanting to help Karen, Michele advised her to consider ending her relationship with Randy and finding a better boyfriend. However, this advice angered Karen. As a result, Karen and Laura started spreading rumors again and decided to confront Michele at a local park. During the confrontation, Michele tried to appease Karen and Laura, reminding them that a similar situation had occurred the previous year and that she would never deliberately hurt them. Karen had argued with Michele 10 days before she was murdered. During that argument, Karen yelled at Michele, threatened her with a broken beer bottle, and pushed her to the ground before leaving with Laura. However, Laura later apologized to Michele, and the 2 set aside their differences to continue their friendship. Karen did not contact Michele for a while, but on October 1st, she sincerely apologized for her earlier behavior. This meant a lot to Michele because she missed her friends, so the 3 of them decided to meet up at Stonehurst Park later that day. On October 1st, 1985, Michele told her mother that she planned to go out with her friends. After gaining her mother's approval, on the condition that she be home by 6 p.m., Michele went outside to wait for Laura to pick her up. When Laura arrived, they drove around before deciding to stop at Stonehurst Park. After parking, they waited for Karen to arrive. A few minutes later, Karen pulled into the parking lot, with Eva, their other friend, in the passenger seat. That's when things got worse for Michele. When Karen pulled into the parking lot, she stopped very close to Laura's car and began to get angry. She rolled down her window and started yelling at Laura, using vulgar and abusive language. Laura also rolled down her window and responded to Karen with equally harsh language. Michele and Eva sat in silence, watching their friend DS argue heatedly. Michele had no idea what they were arguing about. Suddenly, Karen backed up and sped out of the parking lot, with Laura following closely behind. For 45 minutes, they drove at a high pace north of the city and into the mountains. Karen and Laura were driving so furiously that Michele and Eva had to beg them to calm down and stop. The two girls finally drove to a parking lot that led to a large forest. Laura and Karen got out of the car, and an argument broke out, which escalated into a physical fight. Michele also got out of the car in an attempt to stop her friends. However, as Michele left the car, Karen and Laura suddenly stopped fighting and turned towards her. They were so close to Michele that she could neither get back into the car nor move away from it. Karen smiled at Michele and said that she and Laura were not arguing and were not angry with each other, but instead, they were angry with her. They informed her that the whole drama was just a ruse to lure her into the woods so they could confront her and punish her. They yelled at Michele, revealing that they were the ones who spread the rumor because they were convinced that she had slept with their boyfriends, and they would not let her get away with it. Michele tried to plead and convince them, insisting that she would never do such a thing and that she had never had sex with anyone, but they refused to listen. When Michele started to remain quiet, Karen and Laura grabbed her and pushed her down a path into the woods. Michele was very small, only 4 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 95 pounds, while Karen was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds, and Laura was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. Michele was unable to defend herself against them. Then they repeatedly forced her to go further down the trail. Eva, on the other hand, stayed in the car the whole time the altercation occurred. Eventually, she got out of the car and started walking behind the group. Eva had not participated in any of the girls' actions in the woods, and she did not even know why they were taking Michele in the first place. As the group left the parking area and headed deeper into the woods, Laura stopped and confronted Michele, who was crying helplessly and fearfully. Laura punched Michele in the face, and Karen immediately joined in the beating. In a matter of seconds, Michele was beaten, punched, and stomped, lying motionless on the ground. When the group stopped, Laura took a knife and cut off chunks of Michele's hair. They did this intentionally because they knew Michele loved her long, beautiful hair. Karen wanted to join in the cutting but didn't have a knife, so she simply pulled at each strand of hair with her hands. Eva stood and watched everything unfold. After they finished cutting, they tied Michele's hands behind her back and gagged her. Since they were about 10 feet away from a river, Laura walked down to the stream, looked directly at Michele, splashed the a tear, and began teasing her, asking her to get into the water with her. When Michele refused to budge, Karen grabbed Michele and pulled her up, then pushed Michele towards the river, causing her to fall down. With her hands tied behind her back, Michele's face hit the ground, and she rolled into the river. Laura and Karen had held her body under 8 inches of water. When Michele suddenly broke free from Karen's grasp and lifted her head above water, Eva heard her scream. After Michele screamed, Karen grabbed her head and pushed her under the water. When the girls realized that Michele was almost drowning, they let her go and ran to a large log, then brought it over and placed it on Michele's head. Laura and Karen grabbed her and pulled her into the water, forcing Eva to run back down the trail to the cars. When she reached the parking lot, Eva realized that both cars were locked and they were too far away to call for help. She was forced to start walking back down the trail. After a while, she heard a terrifying scream. She stopped, returned to the car, and lay down on the ground in a fetal position, waiting for about an hour for the girls to return. Finally, she saw Laura and Karen, soaked and smiling happily. However, Michele was not with them. After leaving the woods, they got into the car with Eva and headed home. For hours after the ordeal, Laura called Michele's mother and asked to speak with her. When Michele's mother, Michele Avila, said she thought her daughter was with Laura, Laura claimed she had dropped Michele off with 3 boys in a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura stated that she returned to the spot where she had dropped Michele off, but both Michele and the three boys were gone. On October 4, 1985, Michele's body was found face down in a stream in Big Topanga Canyon in the Angeles National Forest. 3 days later, a group of hikers contacted the police. When the police arrived, they discovered that Michele had drowned in water only 8 inches deep. Her waist-length hair had been cut off, and a 4-foot-long log was found on her body. Police also found cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls near the location where Michele's body was discovered. Detectives investigated the case based on the girl's statements that Michele had been traveling with 3 men in a blue Camaro before she disappeared. This would explain some of the random items found around the crime scene. However, this statement led detectives to be misled and to search for men who did not exist for 3 years. Additionally, Irene later stated that she did not suspect Karen or Laura of being involved in her daughter's death, as both attended Michele's funeral, and Laura even sent the family a condolence card along with $20. Karen moved in with Michele's family for an extended period, showing her support and sympathy for them. She did her best to help catch the killers. In reality, however, Karen wanted to keep a close eye on the investigation and tried to avoid investigators as much as possible. Karen even slept in Michele's bed and shared dinner with her family on several occasions. However, Karen was one of the girls responsible for Michele's death. Karen also appeared to be haunted by the murder, visiting Michele's grave several times a week and decorating her room with pictures of Michele and newspaper articles about the case. She often went to the creek where Michele's body was found. Once, Karen told Irene that she had seen Michele's ghost. Detectives had no leads on the case until 3 years later, on July 26, 1988, when Eva drove 45 minutes into the mountains and turned herself into the police, revealing the entire story. She explained the rumors that had been circulating, the discord that had occurred among them, all the anger and jealousy, as well as every detail of the murder that she knew. Eva mentioned that it took her so long to come forward because Karen and Laura had threatened her, warning her not to say a word about anything she had seen, for fear they would kill her. In March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The jury later stated that they did not believe the murder was premeditated and dismissed the first-degree murder charge. Karen Severson was released on December 9, 2011, after serving 21.5 years, and Laura Doyle was released in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen Severson attempted to profit from writing a memoir about the murder and her life in prison, but her book did not sell well. She also appeared to have reached an agreement to make a movie about the murder, but Avila's family sued her in 2015, seeking to take profits from the sale of the work. As a result, the state of California passed Michele's law, which requires organizations that support the publication of works by criminals to contact the families of victims regarding such works. Michele's story has sparked discussions about the effects of bullying, the complexities of teen relationships. Community initiatives and support networks have emerged to provide resources and support to those affected by similar experiences. As we remember Michele, we honor her memory by working to create a world where friendships are built on trust and compassion. Her legacy serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, kindness, and the opportunity to live a life free from harm. Ultimately, Michele Yvette, Missy Avila's legacy will be one of courage and optimism. Hopefully, her memory will inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those who have been betrayed, and work toward a future where understanding and empathy are prioritized. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Sainsbury, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson-Monro provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Patrick de la Cerda. Patrick de la Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a city known for its picturesque metropolitan area. His father, Max Dira, was a native of Spain, while his mother, Patricia Ranza, was born and raised in France before moving to the United States in the 1980s, where she met and married Max. Patrick grew up in a warm family environment where he was surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. He was a kind, intelligent, and sociable person who excelled in school and had a large circle of friends. From a young age, Patrick was very close to his parents, who prioritized his education and well-being, providing him with every opportunity to grow into a capable and responsible individual. Patrick's father was a dedicated and skilled professional in the construction industry. Although the family was not wealthy, they were considered well off by the standards of the big city. After completing high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps and pursue a degree in construction. However, during his time at university, his parents made the difficult decision to divorce after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce of Patrick's parents was a quiet and peaceful one, with no scandals or disputes over property. After the separation, his mother moved to Deltona, a small town on the east coast of the state, where she eventually remarried. Patrick, on the other hand, chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together in the construction industry and were highly respected. Despite the divorce, the family remained very close, and all members maintained a friendly relationship with one another. The family continued to stay in touch, regularly calling and communicating with each other. They were always willing to lend a helping hand when needed. Patrick often visited his mother in Deltona and shared with her details of his life, including his relationships and romantic interests. With his French and Spanish heritage, Patrick had grown up to be a charming and attractive young man, which helped him win over women at a relatively young age. Patrick grew up in a family that valued strong relationships, so he never sought casual flings. Instead, he dreams of finding lasting love, living peacefully, and building a lifelong family with someone special. He created a profile on a popular dating website at the suggestion of a friend, but he didn't have high hopes of actually meeting his soul mate on the dating website. One June evening in 2017, Patrick half-heartedly scrolled through profiles of women on the site. Then, he came across a photo that caught his attention, a stunning brunette with an unforgettable appearance, big, expressive eyes, and a charming smile. Patrick was immediately smitten and decided to send her a message. She replied, much to his delight, and they easily fell into a comfortable conversation. Jessica Devnani was born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking. Following graduation, she landed a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Around that time, she met a handsome young man online. They quickly hit it off, exchanging messages and eventually phone numbers. They had long conversations every day, creating a deep emotional bond and strong trust. As their online friendship grew, they decided to meet in person. Since they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a meet-up spot roughly equidistant from each other. On their first date, Patrick knew he had found the person he had been searching for, and he didn't want to let her go. Jessica felt the same way about him. However, Jessica was slightly taken aback by their age difference. She was 4 years older than Patrick. After their date, on his way home, Patrick called his mother to tell her what happened. They had been in a long-distance relationship for months, which was becoming increasingly difficult. Due to the distance between them, they could only see each other on weekends, and even then, they had to meet at a location convenient for both of them. Usually, they will rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot and use the time to enjoy quality time together. However, by Sunday night, they would have to return to their respective homes, as they had work commitments on Monday mornings. In December 2017, Patrick made a significant decision. He relocated to Delton, where his mother lived, in order to be nearer to his girlfriend. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and began making repairs to create a welcoming home for Jessica. Although she couldn't move right away because of work, but they made plans to get together again and have a housewarming party in early spring. They had a special celebration planned on New Year's Eve. To surprise Jessica, Patrick set up a fireworks display in the backyard, getting down on one knee to make his romantic proposal as they gazed up at the festive lights. Patrick got down on one knee, held out a box with a ring, and asked Jessica the most important question of all: would she become his wife? Overjoyed, Jessica happily agreed. Patrick had been looking for an engagement ring for a long time, but in jewelry stores there was no ring beautiful and delicate enough for the occasion. He chose the best option possible to propose before the new year, but he also had a custom ring made from a jewelry shop, designed by himself. Patrick's engagement was just 2 months old, and the wedding preparations were well underway. His choice of partner had been approved by their parents, and they was overjoyed as they prepared to start a new life together. They had plans for a grand celebration, either in Miami on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean or in France, where the groom's mother was from, on February 27, 2018. On that day, Patrick's father, Max, received a call from a courier while he was at work. The delivery man explained that Patrick's order has been delivered, but Patrick did not answer the door or answer the phone. Max was taken aback by Patrick's unexpected actions, which immediately raised his level of concern. Since Max was tied up at work and couldn't go check on Patrick, Max asked his future daughter-in-law to go instead. Patrick's father called Jessica in a panicked tone, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he wasn't responding to her calls or messages. When she shared this with Patrick's father, Max, he feared the worst. Jessica immediately dropped everything and rushed to Patrick's house. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, indicating he was still at home. Using her own key, she entered the yard and called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica carefully opened the front door and was met with a horrific sight. Patrick was lying in a pool of blood, showing no signs of life. She quickly called emergency services, but the paramedics were unable to save Patrick and declared him dead at the scene. When the police arrived, Jessica was overcome with grief, sobbing in the backyard where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months earlier. An officer spoke to her, and she raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. She claimed to know who was accountable for Patrick's murder, naming her wealthy ex-boyfriend as the culprit. To comprehend this complex case and identify potential suspects, it's essential to revisit the past when Patrick first met Jessica. At that time, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a wealthy businessman who owned an investment fund. She met Gregory during her student years, and he was 20 years her senior. Gregory showered Jessica with expensive gifts and took her on lavish vacations, eventually winning her affection. Jessica thought she had found her soulmate, but soon she began to notice some disturbing patterns in her ex-boyfriend Gregory's behavior. He was extremely controlling, constantly monitoring her movements and interactions with others. If she had an admirer, Gregory would quickly get rid of them through threats and intimidation. Meanwhile, he kept his own life a mystery, sharing very little about himself with Jessica. Their relationship lasted nearly 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. They only spent time together or went on vacation when he wanted to, and he rarely invited her to his home. Gregory claimed he was too busy, but Jessica longed for a normal family life and children. However, every time she brought it up, Gregory would say it wasn't the right time. When Jessica tried to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her with a ring, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory wanted to. One day, Gregory was in a car accident and ended up in the hospital. When Jessica rushed to his side, she decided to stop by his house to pick up some things for him. That's when she encountered a woman she had never seen before. Instead of introducing herself, the stranger asked Jessica who she was. Jessica showed her the ring on her hand and that she was the landlord's fiancée. Jessica later found out that Gregory was married to someone else, Diora Sanchez Bender. Devastated, Jessica immediately broke off the relationship. However, Gregory really wanted to keep her, begging for forgiveness and promising to divorce his wife and marry Jessica in the future. Jessica eventually gave in and continued the affair, but as time went on, nothing changed, and Jessica became exhausted. Jessica changed her life and started dating someone new, Patrick, through a dating website. She then ended her relationship with Gregory and informed him that it was over. But Gregory did not give up and started to do worse things. Gregory asked Jessica to reconsider their relationship. He then became aggressive, and he resorted to threatening and harassing her. Realizing that Jessica had moved on, Gregory turned to private investigators to hack into her online accounts and find out who she was talking to. He soon discovered Patrick's identity and contact information. Then, Gregory started sending threatening messages to Patrick. Patrick received threatening messages from Gregory, Jessica's ex-boyfriend, who demanded that Patrick end his relationship with Jessica, referring to her as his fiancée. After receiving the threats, Patrick remained calm because he thought they would not come true. However, Jessica is scared because she knows Gregory's aggressive nature and that he has a large collection of weapons. She suggested breaking up with Patrick to avoid any potential harm, but Patrick refused. They decided to report the incidents to the police, providing evidence of Gregory's stalking and threats. They obtained a restraining order, which prohibited Gregory from approaching or contacting them. Additionally, Gregory was required to surrender his firearms. For a while, the situation seemed to calm down, and they thought they had finally found peace. Nevertheless, Jessica convinced Patrick to install CCTV cameras around and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might violate the restraining order. Let's go back to the events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene inspection, investigators quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Instead, they believed the murder was personally motivated, given the nature of Patrick's injuries, which suggested a deep-seated hatred. Patrick, 25 years old, had 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. The body also showed signs of a fall from a ladder. The body was found on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. Investigators theorized that the killer likely snuck into the house and waited for the owner, Patrick, on the second floor. When Patrick entered the house and began to climb the stairs, the killer ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. As Patrick rolled down the stairs, the killer followed, shooting him in the chest and then twice in the head. The murder weapon, a rare pistol, was not recovered, but several shell casings were found at the crime scene. The police found 3 casings at the scene, but a 4th one was missing. This led investigators to suspect that the killer might have taken it as a souvenir. The initial suspect was Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with Patrick. The veteran had been involved in combat and had suffered a severe head injury, which led to the development of a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In a previous incident, the veteran had mistakenly shot at his neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. After his release, the veteran continued to harass the victim, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. The investigation initially centered around the veteran with a history of mental health issues, as his unusual behavior and mindset suggested a possible motive for the crime. Although he truly hated Patrick, he still had an alibi for the time of the murder, confirmed by many witnesses. As the police looked for evidence and attempted to provoke a response from the perpetrator, it became clear that the crime was not a robbery gone, as the house was undisturbed and valuables remained untouched. The only items missing were the hard drives containing video surveillance footage, making it impossible to identify who entered and left the house that day. Furthermore, no evidence was found at the crime scene. Forensic experts were unable to find a single fingerprint, shoe print, or DNA trace, suggesting that the murder was meticulously planned and executed. Although the investigation suspected Gregory's involvement, it seemed likely that he would escape justice due to the lack of concrete evidence. The police asked Jessica to help them with a secret plan to catch her ex-boyfriend, Gregory, off guard. She agreed to make the call, and as the police had hoped, Gregory answered. Jessica tried to lure him into a conversation, but it quickly became apparent that he had anticipated the trap and was not falling for it. Gregory seemed unflappable as Jessica confronted him about Patrick's death. When she accused him directly, he acted shocked and even offered her his condolences. Despite her best efforts to get him to lose his cool, he didn't give away any incriminating information. In the end, the police didn't have enough evidence to hold or question Gregory, so he remained at large, abiding by the terms of a restraining order. He appeared to have already distanced himself from Jessica, makes gathering evidence more difficult. As the police investigation stagnated due to lack of evidence, Diora Sanchez, Gregory's wife, called to reveal she had vital information about Patrick's death. Upon arrival at the police station, Diora told investigators about discovering a cryptic notebook in Gregory's office just days before the crime occurred. Upon flipping through the notebook's pages, Diora stumbled upon an entry containing an address she didn't recognize, accompanied by a series of cryptic digits that appeared to be a code. Diora had previously ignored some suspicious sketches made by Gregory, but when she saw a news report about a young man's murder, she realized the significance of those sketches. The crime scene's layout matched the drawings Gregory had made. Diora informed the investigators, who then obtained a search warrant for Gregory's house. Upon searching, the police found a mysterious notebook in Gregory's office, but several key pages were missing. They later discovered those pages in a trash can, carelessly discarded after being ripped out and crumpled. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including turning off the victim's phone, wearing gloves, and using a special lubricant on shoes to avoid leaving footprints. The records also revealed that Gregory had been stalking the victim, Patrick, and knew his daily routine, including the time he returned home. Furthermore, Gregory knew the location of surveillance cameras in and around Patrick's house, suggesting this was a carefully planned and executed crime. In addition to committing the crime, Gregory took steps to cover his tracks by disposing of the weapon, clothes, shoes, and gloves. However, he failed to destroy his own records, which later incriminated him. Furthermore, his wife's curiosity ultimately worked against him. A shell casing was discovered in a cigar box, which was meant to be taken as a trophy by the gunman. Forensic analysis confirmed that the casing matched the one found at the crime scene. The trial of Gregory posed a challenge due to the lack of direct evidence. Although the accumulated evidence was sufficient to arrest him, it was largely circumstantial. Since the crime weapon was never recovered, there was no definitive proof that Gregory was at the victim's house on the day of the crime. Moreover, there were no eyewitnesses to testify against him. The trial, which began in May 2021, more than 3 years after the crime, was heavily influenced by the skilled lawyers Gregory hired. He appeared confident and seemed to believe he would evade punishment. A crucial witness, Jessica, provided detailed testimony about her long-term relationship with Gregory, including his marital status, her attempts to break up with him, and the subsequent harassment and threats he made against her and Patrick. Jessica presented evidence of her conversations with Gregory, including screenshots of their conversations and their phone records. However, Gregory's lawyers countered by blaming Jessica, claiming that she was responsible for Gregory's behavior. They claimed that Jessica had started a new relationship with Patrick while still involved with Gregory, and that she had hurt his self-esteem. The defense downplayed the significance of the written plans for the murder, describing them as mere fantasies of a hurt man seeking revenge on his rival. They argued that Gregory never acted on these plans and therefore did not leave any evidence at the crime scene. Additionally, the lawyers claimed that the search of Gregory's home was conducted illegally and with procedural errors, suggesting that the shell casing found there could have been planted. The crime weapon was never found, and Jessica's identification of the gun model was uncertain. She had previously seen a similar gun in her boyfriend's collection, but she wasn't familiar with firearms and could have been mistaken. The defendant's ex-wife, Diora Sanchez, was called to testify. During her testimony, the defendant, Gregory, unexpectedly professed his love for Diora. This declaration seemed to affect Diora, and her testimony became unclear. Diora claimed to have forgotten some details and ultimately stated that she doubted Gregory's capability for murder, given their long history together. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home and the lack of direct evidence, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. Gregory was given a life sentence with no possibility of parole. As the judge read out the sentence, the defendant fixed Jessica with an intense stare, not blinking once. His glare made her feel nauseous. Jessica sat next to Patrick's mother and suddenly burst into uncontrollable sobs, finding it hard to breathe. Despite multiple attempts by Gregory's lawyers to appeal the verdict, all their efforts were unsuccessful. The case attracted public attention, with many outraged that a wealthy businessman had brutally murdered a working-class man and attempted to escape justice. Patrick's story was widely reported in the press, and Gregory remains in prison to this day. Jessica Dira said she is grateful that justice has been served, and Patrick's memory will always live on in her. She wears the engagement ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her but never got the chance. Jessica remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as one of their own. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression. This challenging time in him the value of hard work and the importance of money, as he learned to appreciate every dollar he made. His family struggled financially, which likely motivated him to become determined and ambitious. Dale married Glee Michele, a multi-talented woman, who worked as an elementary school teacher, a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. They had 2 children, Tiffany born in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable life, including a home in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Peraro Dunes, luxury cars, and designer clothing. After serving in the Air Force, Dale became a successful businessman. He eventually became the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that sold small aircraft. The primary source of the Ewell income came from selling light aircraft and investing heavily in the stock market. After establishing a successful aviation business, Dale expanded into buying several farms, accumulating substantial wealth. Together, Dale and Glee were worth an estimated $8 million, embodying the American dream. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly. Their children chose different directions in life. Tiffany pursued a similar career to her parents, whereas Dana chose a distinctly different route. At university, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, falsely claiming to be the source of his family's wealth. This fabricated story gained attention from a local newspaper and was even included in his school yearbook. In 1990, while attending Santa Clara University, Dana was fixated on wealth and luxury. He owned a BMW and had access to funds, allowing him to indulge in expensive items like jewelry. From a young age, Dana had a habit of lying and making up stories. Despite being intelligent and well-educated, Dana's ambitions went beyond comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He had the same ambitions as his father, but he didn't have the drive to achieve them in a proper and lawful way. Dana began fabricating elaborate and false stories about his accomplishments and importance while he was a student at the University of Santa Clara. He lied to both faculty and peers, claiming he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. His false narrative included starting as a stockbroker at 18, moving to aircraft sales, and eventually becoming president of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The tension between Dana and his father, Doyle, was largely unknown to others. Dana's tall tales may have caused his father embarrassment and contributed to their conflicts. Despite Doyle's humble beginnings and generous support for his children, Dana seemed to have an excessive sense of entitlement. Dana Ewell presented himself as excessively self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing his wealth and social standing above all else. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, the weather in Sunnyside, California was mild with partial sunshine, resulting in a pleasant afternoon. Doyle, 59, spent the Easter weekend at his beach house with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany. Glee and Tiffany returned to their home in Sunnyside by car, while Doyle flew his private plane to his hangar and then drove home. When they arrived, they were ambushed. Tiffany was shot in the head and killed, followed by Glee, who was shot multiple times. The killers stayed in the house, waiting for Doyle to arrive. 30 minutes later, Doyle arrived home and was also fatally shot as he entered the house from the garage. 2 days later, Dana, the youngest member of the family, tried to contact his parents but was unable to reach them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. On April 21, 1992, the family's housekeeper, Juanita, arrived at the house for work and found Tiffany's body lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Juanita was distraught and sought help from a neighbor, who called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California. At the time of the murders, Dana was contacted by the authorities. His girlfriend's father quickly arranged for him to fly to Fresno, and Dana was visibly upset during this time. The police then started a thorough investigation, spending many days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was made to look like a robbery. However, experienced detectives believed the scene was deliberately staged to make it appear as though the family had been attacked and then killed by an intruder. Upon further examination, detectives found several irregularities, including the lack of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives found that the attack was carefully planned and carried out. The attacker was a skilled shooter, missing only one shot, and had even picked up the spent bullet casings inside the house. Investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition that Doyle had purchased. It was later discovered that it had been used in the murder. The home appeared to have been ransacked, but nothing valuable was missing. There was no evidence of forced entry, and the alarm, which was usually turned on, had been turned off. Investigators thoroughly examined the victims' backgrounds, searching for any clues that might be connected to their deaths. They looked into Doyle's past dealings, which included selling airplanes to an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a questionable real estate transaction with Doyle's brother that potentially put investors at risk of losing millions. The police thoroughly investigated and eliminated all other potential suspects with motives. Ultimately, they concentrating on Dana, as he was the one who would benefit the most from the tragic event. As the only surviving member of the Ewell family and the main beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Even though he had a solid alibi, having been with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's actions did not ease the concerns of others, but rather intensified their suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Although he outwardly showed distress and even offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, his grief seemed insincere. His reaction to the horrific killing of family members seemed surprisingly subdued, as he displayed little of the shock and sorrow that people typically exhibit in response to such a traumatic event. Instead of focusing on mourning the loss of his loved ones, Dana seemed more concerned with his parents' wills and inheritance. He did something disturbing, inviting a friend to view the house while there was still obvious blood on it, demonstrating a disregard for the victims. Furthermore, he allegedly expressed contempt for the police investigation, calling the investigators dummies who would never solve the case. Dana eluded authorities for 3 years, during which time they thoroughly investigated every lead to help solve the case. The situation worsened after Dale's brothers reported Dana to the authorities, claiming he had done something wrong. According to them, Dana became furious when he heard the will being read, as he learned that he wouldn't have full access to the $8 million estate until he was in his 30s. Dana reportedly slammed his hands on the table and screamed, asking why his father could do this to him. The trust stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he was 25, then he would receive investment dividends until he was 30. At 30, he would have access to half of the estate, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funeral, the Ewell brothers act to prevent Dana from reclaiming what he believes is his. However, Dana managed to obtain around $300,000 from an insurance policy. Dana's uncles actively prevented him from inheriting his father's assets, causing him significant frustration. Despite the growing scrutiny from investigators and accusations from his own family members that he was involved in the murder to gain control of the family estate, Dana showed no signs of worry. He continued to live a lavish lifestyle, showering his girlfriend Monica with expensive gifts and even helping with her education costs. However, it was unclear where his money was coming from. Investigators suspected that money was a key factor in the murders and dug deeper. They discovered that Dana had been stealing money from various sources, including his grandmother's trust account, which had held $400,000. By the time detectives stepped in, the grandmother was left with only $22,000 to cover her care at a nursing home. The discovery that Dana had been exploiting his grandmother for personal gain further strengthened the police's suspicions about his character. However, authorities still need concrete evidence to prove Dana's involvement in the murder. Joel, one of Dana's college acquaintances, was particularly drawn to Dana's stories of a wealthy, successful lifestyle. Joel found Dana's apparent ability to effortlessly attract beautiful women especially intriguing. People around were surprised by their friendship, as they seemed to have little in common. Dana was driven by a desire for higher social status, while Joel's interests lay in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him the opportunity to attend fancy parties and meet attractive women. Shortly after the Ewell family murders, Joel dropped out of school and soon became Dana's roommate in the Ewell family's former home. This marked a significant development in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel started making unusual purchases, such as helicopter flying lessons, despite Joel having no apparent source of income. As a result, investigators began surveilling both, monitoring their communications through pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and tapped his landline in May 1993. An officer overheard Joel discussing the investigation on a payphone, saying, They don't have evidence. They'll try to catch you in a lie. Meanwhile, Dana continued spending lavishly, buying a new car for his girlfriend and paying her law school tuition. After using up the insurance payout, he took $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $22,000 for her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a rare 9mm assault rifle made in Colorado. Records from the company showed that a rifle had been bought by Innes Jack Pond just before April 1992. Notably, Jack was a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack first denied buying the rifle, then claimed he bought it as a birthday present for himself, and said the gun was later stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel continued to mount. At one point, detectives visited Dana at his university dorm and told him they believed Joel was responsible for killing his family. Dana stayed silent, visibly pale. After the detectives departed, Dana and his girlfriend, Monica, promptly contacted Joel's brother, Radovic, but they did not realize that they were being followed by the police. On March 2, 1995, police arrested Dana, Joel, and Peter, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had made a deal with the authorities, agreeing to testify against his younger brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. Peter confessed to the police that he had made a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He also admitted to getting rid of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes, and some gun magazines. Peter said he did these things with the help of Jack Pond. When Jack was arrested, he gave a different account of the gun. He said he bought the gun for Joel but didn't know it was going to be used for the murders. Jack also confirmed that he and Peter had disposed of evidence together. Jack received immunity in exchange for his testimony, just like Peter. As a result of statements made by Peter and Jack, the barrel of the murder weapon was found buried in a field in Rica. Unlike Peter and Jack, Dana and Joel were not offered plea deals. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, which made them eligible for the death penalty. The trial began in late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had previously been close friends and had even lived together in the house where the murders occurred, now had separate lawyers and took different stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive for the murders was greed, claiming he had promised Joel a share of the inheritance. Dana's lawyer argued that he was innocent, suggesting that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Joel's lawyer acknowledged the strong evidence against his client and focused on trying to save him from the death penalty. During the trial, Jack Pond testified that he had bought the murder weapon for Joel and helped dispose of it. He also said Joel had given him details of the incidents on the day of the murder, in April 1992. According to Jack, Dana had asked Joel for a favor that he found hard to refuse. Having taken steps to avoid leaving DNA evidence behind, Joel carried out Dana's plan by entering the Ewell residence. He shaved off all body hair and then waited 12 hours on a plastic sheet to minimize the risk of leaving any traces, including an eyelash. He was also instructed to retrieve all bullet casings. Tiffany was shot in the back of the head and died instantly, without seeing her killer. Glee, however, saw Joel and tried to escape to the office, but was shot and severely injured. Joel pursued her and eventually killed her. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel had shot Glee multiple times at close range, and that she had recognized him as a friend of Dana's who had visited the family a month earlier. After killing Glee, Joel reloaded his gun and put on new gloves, then waited for Doyle to arrive, whom he also murdered. On May 27, 1998, after an 8-month trial, the jury delivered a finding Dana Ewell and Joel guilty on all charges. However, they could not agree on the sentencing. 2 votes saved Joel from the death penalty, while Dana escaped the death penalty by just 1 vote. In the end, Both received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Dana was imprisoned at Corcoran State Prison, 50 miles south of Fresno. He was among inmates like Charles Manson. His grandmother, whom he stole from, died in 1999. Dana claims to have undergone a spiritual transformation and become a Christian while in prison. Joel was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Meanwhile, Jack Pond pursued a career in law, becoming an attorney. Monica Zent broke up with Dana, finished law school, and established a successful law practice. Although Monica was thoroughly investigated, no evidence connected her to the crime. The only suspicious aspects were her initial unwillingness to cooperate and that some of the funds were used to help pay for her law school expenses. Dana Ewell's actions can be summed up by 3 words: greed, entitlement, and heartlessness. His extreme desire for wealth led him to manipulate and betray those closest to him, ultimately leading to the tragic deaths of his family members. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family due to their stable economic background and well-behaved children, earning them genuine admiration from those around them. William Petit, the father, was a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership skills. He was also the top student in his class, going on to earn a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William's true passion lay in helping others, caring for the sick, and making a positive impact on the social. After completing his law degree, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It was during his 3rd year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh that William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse specializing in oncology and co-director of the Health Center for a pre-graduate internship program. They fell deeply in love, with those who knew them confirming that they were perfectly suited for each other. The couple got married in 1985. 4 years later, they had their first daughter, Haley. Her birth inspired them to have a large family, which prompted them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. Following childbirth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and internship co-director. However, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease with no cure that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her family remained supportive throughout. At 10 years old, Haley started raising money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, generating significant funds over time. Michaela also performed well academically. And when Haley went to college, Michaela planned to take over the fundraising efforts so she could continue supporting their community. The summer before, Michaela had learned to cook and she enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this daily activity leads the family to an encounter with a criminal. One July evening in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner, but she needed additional ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market, where they coincidentally encountered Joshua Komisarjevsky, a man recently released from prison. Joshua had experienced a traumatic and complicated childhood. He was born to teenage parents. He was put up for adoption a week after birth and adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, renowned artists in Europe known for their strict and religious upbringing. Joshua had a high IQ, but struggled in school, prompting his parents to decide that homeschooling was a better option. During his trial, Joshua revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose not to address the issue. This traumatic experience contributed to the development of his rebellious personality. At the age of 14, Joshua was accused of abusing his sister. Around the same time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 charges of burglary and resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he gave a chilling confession, revealing that he enjoyed invading other people's private space, enjoyed the feeling of being close to them while they slept, and found particular satisfaction in making others feel insecure. Released on parole in 2007 at the age of 27, officials deemed Joshua a danger to society, describing him as a perverted individual and disturbing behavior. Despite these warnings, the jury declared him fit for release. Following his release, Joshua stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, starting with his first incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. He was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary, and after being sentenced in 2004, he was granted parole in 2006, which led him to the same halfway house where he met Joshua. On July 22, 2007, Joshua trailed Michele Petit and her mother as they traveled to a nearby market to purchase. He paid close attention to and noted specific details about Michele's vehicle, facial features, and blonde hair. After completing their shopping, Michele and her mother returned home, having no knowledge that Joshua had been following them. Later, Hayes sent Joshua a text message indicating he was impatient to start and needed a drink soon. Hayes asked if their plan was still on, to which Joshua confirmed to be yes. When Hayes asked how much longer he had to wait, Joshua told him he was busy putting his child to bed and advised Hayes to be patient. Hayes responded by expressing his eagerness to proceed. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly follows the Petit family in his car to find out the exact location of their house. The whole family was enjoying a nice dinner together, but they unaware that it would be the last time they would all be together. Later that night, while everyone was asleep except for William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was disrupted by strange noises inside the house. William remembered feeling groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Joshua and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door, initially planning to rob the family. However, upon finding a baseball bat, they used it to brutally beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. One of the intruders threatened to shoot him if he moved. William was then restrained with ropes, tied to a pole in the basement. Joshua and Haley proceeded upstairs to Haley's room, where they found her sleeping. They tied Haley and Michele to their bedposts, covering their heads with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit had fallen asleep, but was soon woken up by Joshua and Hayes. They controlled Jennifer by tying her hands and feet, feeling that they now had control of the house. Joshua and Hayes then took their time to thoroughly inspect the house, and even stopped to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After collecting valuables such as jewelry, cash, Joshua and Hayes decided it was time to leave. It seemed the Petit family's ordeal was finally over as they heard the burglars leave the house. However, their nightmare was far from over. Joshua and Hayes sold the items at a pawn shop, but after realizing they hadn't made as much money as they expected, their greed drove them to return to the house. When they returned to the Petit house, they discovered a check register with $40,000 and decided to steal a total of $155,000. Once back, they informed Jennifer of their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't comply. Desperate and prioritizing her daughter's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to accompany Hayes to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence to enter Michele's room. He untied Michele, undressed her, and took photos with his cell phone. He assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, Joshua took her to the bathroom to clean her, aiming to eliminate any DNA evidence. He ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The evidence that Joshua raped Michele was found during her autopsy. State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered Joshua's DNA in Michele's body. At the bank, everything initially seemed to go smoothly. However, Hayes failed to notice Jennifer's actions while she was in line. Before approaching the teller, Jennifer wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read that her name was Jennifer Petit, she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account, and that her family was in danger, so Jennifer asked them to call the police, or her family would be killed. The teller gave Jennifer the money despite her lack of identification. With the cash, Jennifer left the bank and returned to the car with Hayes. The bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. However, the manager told the 911 dispatcher that Jennifer had indicated the home invaders were being nice and only wanted money. Cheshire police received a report from the bank and they set up a vehicle perimeter around the area without alerting the suspect. From a distance, the police observed the situation without intervening. Meanwhile, back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice about his actions towards Michele, implying that he could easily harm Jennifer as well. Hayes then grabbed Jennifer, pinned her to the ground, and started removing her clothes. William heard his wife being assaulted upstairs and managed to flee. One of the intruders responded, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William crawled to the basement stairs and eventually made it to the backyard. William thought the intruders would shoot them all soon, so he knew he had to act fast. Joshua checked on William but found he had escaped. According to Hayes' confession, Joshua told Hayes that William had gotten away while Hayes was raping Jennifer in the living room. Upon hearing this, Hayes strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Shortly after, they heard William shouting for help. A neighbor, who initially didn't recognize William due to his injuries, immediately called 911. Realizing the police would arrive soon, Joshua and Hayes tried to eliminate evidence. Hayes and Joshua doused Jennifer's lifeless body, various parts of the house including Michele and Haley's bedroom, and also Michele and Haley themselves with gasoline. Hayes and Joshua started a fire at the scene, unaware that the police had blocked off the area just a few miles away. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle and were surrounded by officers. The two perpetrators, Joshua and Hayes, who were later identified as ex-convicts, were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. Meanwhile, the fire at the house was spreading rapidly. An ambulance arrived and took William Petit, was seriously injured, to the nearest hospital. Firefighters soon followed and attempted to put out the blaze. Once the fire was extinguished, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. The first body they found was Jennifer's, which was badly charred and had rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they found Michele tied to her bed, her body completely consumed by the fire. In a desperate bid to escape, Haley had managed to break free restraints but collapsed just a few meters away due to smoke inhalation. William had also managed to free himself and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help, but the neighbor didn't initially recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Joshua and Hayes admitted to the murders during questioning. Detectives noticed that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. However, each attacker claimed the other was the main person responsible for planning the home invasion. Joshua also accused William of being responsible for the murders. In his diary, Joshua referred to William as a coward, stating that William had the opportunity to save his family but chose not to. The trial of Hayes started on September 13, 2010, with a jury of 12 people, consisting of 7 women and 5 men. The defense team argued that Joshua was the mastermind behind the crime and was responsible for making it more brutal. On the other hand, the prosecutors believed that both Hayes and Joshua were equally responsible. After about 5 hours of discussion, the jury found Hayes guilty on October 5. The sentencing phase began on October 18, but the jury was initially torn between recommending life imprisonment or the death penalty. Hayes' defense team argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. However, on November 8, the jury decided to recommend the death sentence for Hayes. Before the trial, Hayes had tried to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but the prosecutors wanted the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain he caused the Petit family. He stated that death would be a welcome relief and hoped it would bring some peace to those he hurt. Judge John Blues sentenced Hayes to 6 death sentences and 106 additional years for other crimes. However, when Connecticut abolished capital punishment in 2015, Hayes' death sentence was changed to life imprisonment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Hayes was the one who directed Joshua. Joshua was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During Joshua's sentencing, he expressed remorse and shame for the crime, claiming he never intended to kill anyone. The judge set an execution date of July 20, 2012, holding Joshua accountable for his actions. However, in August 2015, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished capital punishment. William Petit, the lone survivor of his family, was released from the hospital after 4 days. Upon his discharge, he immediately attended the funeral service for his wife and daughters. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, William struggled to come to terms with the devastating reality that his loved ones were truly gone forever. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, but his family moved to Cedar City, Utah, when he was young, after his father finished dental school. Growing up, Michael was an active boy who enjoyed playing baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and performed well academically. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska during the summer, where he quickly rose to the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men due to his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then served a mission trip to South Brazil as a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which further deepened his faith and strengthened his bond with his religious community. Upon returning to the United States, Michael pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, he met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love, getting married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed like the perfect family man to those who didn't know him. He was always involved in his kids' lives, coaching their sports teams, attending school concerts, and spending quality time with them, whether it was sledding or working on projects in the garage. But on January 4, 2023, the illusion he created around his family life shattered. That day, police found 8 dead bodies at the Haight residence, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned and confused. When Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work, their colleagues became worried and alerted the police to check on the family's welfare at their home in Enoch. The officers arrived at the Haight residence, but no one answered the door. As they walked around the property, it looked like nobody was home. Knowing the family had 5 kids, the police contacted the Iron County School District to see if any of the children were in school that day, but it turned out none of the kids were present when the police arrived at the Haight home. The officers searched the premises to make sure there was no immediate danger, and after a thorough search, confirmed that nobody needed medical attention, and there were no signs of an active threat. The detectives arrived at the crime scene shortly after it was declared. Upon entering the main bedroom, they saw 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach with his head turned to the left, one arm under his head on a pillow, and a blanket covering part of his body. His sister Tasha was similarly positioned with only part of her body covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, they found Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, just like her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the detectives found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, they discovered the 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed with her head resting on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Missy, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered Michael Haight's body in the exercise room in the basement of his home, lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims, including his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children, were found dead with gunshot wounds. Given the circumstances, it didn't take long for the detectives to identify Michael Haight as the primary suspect. They believed he had killed his family members before taking his own life. A neighbor's testimony played a crucial role in helping the detectives reconstruct the timeline of the crime. The neighbor recalled waking up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and hearing a loud bang, similar to fireworks, as she exited her room. However, she felt annoyed because it was past the permitted date for fireworks in the neighborhood. She then heard 2 more bangs in quick succession, followed by a short pause. This pattern continued, with brief pauses before each subsequent bang, except for a longer pause before the final one. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, detectives theorized that the loud noises she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events of that night. They suspected that Michael Hatch committed the brutal murders during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Hatch family murders, detectives discovered that an unnamed person outside the family had reported abuse to the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual claimed that 14-year-old Missy confided in them about her fear of her father, sparking a deeper investigation into the Hatch household. After receiving the DCFS report, Missy and her parents were questioned separately. During Missy's interview, the investigator uncovered disturbing information. Missy revealed that her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she feared he would kill her. She disclosed that the violent attacks began in 2017, including an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When detectives questioned Michael Hatch, he claimed he had never physically harmed his daughter. He downplayed the incidents Missy described, saying they were simply misunderstandings. Michael attributed his emotional turmoil to 2 recent events: the death of his father and his brother's divorce. He stated that, in his distress, he took out his frustration on his older daughter, Tasha. Tasha chose not to pursue criminal charges against Michael. Similarly, the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office decided not to press charges, deeming the case insufficient to meet the prosecution requirements set by the statute. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which revealed that her relationship with Michael did not pose a significant threat to her life. Nevertheless, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months following the case's opening. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, detectives formed a different impression of Michael Hatch than the one he presented to the community. Tasha's friends revealed that whenever they visited, they would often chat with her, while the kitchen water was running to mask their conversation, as Tasha suspected Michael was spying on her discussions. They also helped Tasha with housework during their visits so Michael wouldn't have anything to criticize her about. Tasha's friends disclosed that whenever she texted them, she would respond with brief, upbeat messages, likely aware that Michael might read them. They believed she did this to maintain a positive facade for Michael's benefit, implying that everything was fine in their marriage. Detectives found Michael displayed controlling behavior towards his wife, Tasha. He took away her car keys and phone to keep her from leaving. They also suspected him after he overreacted to her buying a $30 rug from Walmart, accusing her of excessive spending despite the legitimate need. Tasha shared with her friends her concerns that her 7-year-old son, Amon, was increasingly mimicking his father Michael's bad behavior. Whenever she gave Amon an instruction, he would respond by saying that it was not his job. This worried Tasha because it revealed Amon's growing lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. She mentioned that Michael frequently disregarded or ignored her instructions, and Amon seemed to be following his example. In 2022, Tasha prioritized self-care by getting her nails done despite her busy schedule. However, her husband Michael wasn't supportive, imposing strict rules on her independence. After her appointment, Tasha felt confident and told Michael she'd make it a monthly routine, sparking his anger over the potential cost. To address Michael's concerns, Tasha explained calmly that her monthly self-care expenses came out to $25. Despite this, Michael remained skeptical, claiming that by spending money on her nails, Tasha was essentially taking away from their children's basic needs. This stance stemmed from his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. At the same time, Tasha began to prioritize her self-care and eventually started losing weight, a significant change after years of her husband calling her fat and ugly. Michael became angry about her weight loss, accusing Tasha of cheating on him as he struggled to explain the sudden change in her appearance. As Michael's controlling behavior escalated, he tried to manipulate Tasha regarding her weight loss. He begged her to stop, fearing that other men might find her attractive. Underlying this request were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and actions. Michael exhibited a frugal attitude during the holiday season, despite earning a significant income. He allocated only $100 for each of their 5 children to buy gifts, whereas Tasha made sure they had a fulfilling Christmas. However, Michael refused to provide additional funds for his wife and children, justifying his stance by claiming that he didn't see the need to give them more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael controlled every aspect of Tasha's life, including her cleaning and childcare habits. He insisted on using baby wipes, claiming they were eco-friendly and cost-effective, but this caused Tasha stress and compromised her comfort and hygiene. If she didn't comply, Michael threatened trouble, leaving her fearful and submissive. According to Tasha's friends, she revealed to them that Michael was mean to her throughout their marriage, but he didn't mistreat their children until the late 2010s. However, as time passed, the abuse towards Missy worsened, causing her to contemplate suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for Missy, demanding she maintain straight A's despite her struggles. The pressure to meet his expectations became overwhelming for Missy, who was already dealing with the emotional weight of her father's abuse. Missy's friends shared another disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael came home and found Missy resting her head on her mother's lap. He became enraged and ordered Missy to get up and clean her room. This event left Missy deeply shaken, as she remembered gazing into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil staring back. Detectives found another instance where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael's warnings. Michael blamed his wife Tasha for their kids' misbehavior, calling them the worst in the world. He berated Tasha in front of their kids, even calling her fat and ugly. Tasha realized she needed to escape her 20-year marriage to Michael after a distressing incident exposed his abusive nature and temper. Seeing the harm it was causing their kids, she knew she had to leave. Tasha decided to divorce Michael after over 20 years, prioritizing their children's well-being over their marriage. On Dec 21, 2022, she initiated proceedings, but asked to delay serving papers until after the holiday season, wanting one last normal Christmas for their 5 kids before the separation. Michael got divorce papers at his office on Dec 27th. He called Tasha, acting normal, asking about her day, like nothing was wrong. He told her to leave the house but wanted the kids to stay. Tasha refused, insisting on taking the kids with her. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah. That evening, Michael arrived at his mother-in-law's house and tried to persuade Tasha to go for a ride with him. But Tasha declined, telling her friends she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mom Gail moved in to help. However, Michael made things worse by moving into the basement fitness room instead of leaving the house. Tasha told her friends she had found a discrepancy in their children's savings accounts, which held $220,000. What she discovered shocked her. Michael had transferred the money out of the accounts without her knowledge or permission. After her father's death, Tasha inherited several firearms, including hunting rifles and a handgun. When she checked her house in January 2023, she realized all the guns were gone. Further investigation revealed Michael had taken the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family defenseless in case of an emergency. Missy, Michael and Tasha's eldest child, confided in her friends that she would welcome her parents' divorce. She longed for the peace that would come with her father's absence from the home. Missy even kept a secret phone in her room, which she used to record her father's erratic behavior, hoping to gather evidence to support the divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Missy's younger sister, Briley, had a troubled home life due to the constant drama. To escape this, Briley would often visit her neighbor's house, where she found comfort with their grandchildren. Briley confided in a friend that she was relieved about her parents' upcoming divorce. She had even bought some new books, but was too afraid to tell her father, fearing he would become angry. Tasha met her lawyer on January 3, 2023, to discuss her divorce from abusive husband Michael. She felt relieved he'd moved to the basement due to his volatile behavior. Asked if she'd ever feared for her or her children's safety, Tasha said she never had. In hindsight, Tasha's optimism was tragically misplaced. The police investigation was harrowing, piecing together a chilling sequence of events. A disturbing Google search on December 30th stood out, revealing Michael's firearms queries just days before the deadly shooting, painting a chilling picture of his intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as inquiries about how loud a 9mm gunshot is, what a gunshot sounds like, what to do if gunshots are heard near one's house, if a single gunshot in the neighborhood at night would be immediately recognized, and if one would be brave enough to call the police, how loud a gunshot in the house would be, and if a neighbor would hear a gunshot in the garage, and how loud a 40mm pistol is. Michael's suicide note said he'd rather rot in hell than endure his wife's controlling behavior. He felt desperate, frustrated, and trapped, repeatedly asking for help that never came. Determined to end the manipulation, he refused to be a burden to society. The case's details have shocked many, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated, carefully planned to catch his family off guard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak was born on June 10, 1975 in Ohio, USA to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podolak. During his high school years, Matthew was a member of the school hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his naval service, Matthew secured a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, he struggled to get along with his colleagues. According to his sister Chrissy Duca, some co-workers disliked him, possibly due to jealousy over his expected promotion and his uncle's plans to groom him to take over the business. Matthew enjoyed pursuing outdoor activities, such as boating, camping, and hunting. In his free time, he also played softball and hockey. Matthew met Holly McFeature in 2003, and they began dating shortly after. They eventually moved in together in a home in Cleveland. Their friends described Matthew as a man overjoyed to have found someone to settle down with and start a family. Within a year, they had their first child, a daughter named Samantha, and about 2 years later, they had a son named Josh. The family also included a third child from Holly's previous relationship. Matthew's mother, Patricia, described how her son fell deeply in love, giving himself 110% to the relationship. He was truly devoted to Holly. However, by 2005, their romance had deteriorated, becoming argumentative, strained, and divisive. Whenever Matthew and Holly quarreled, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's place. This wasn't an isolated incident, and his friends repeatedly urged him to break off the relationship, warning him about Holly's selfish behavior. Despite their concerns, Matthew refused to listen and always went back to her. Matthew held a life insurance policy that named Holly McFeature as the beneficiary. Despite friends warning Matthew to remove Holly from the list of beneficiaries, he refused to do so. Russell, Matthew's closest friend, portrayed Matthew's emotional state as fluctuating wildly, veering from extreme happiness to intense anger, upset, tears, and occasional fear. Russell also testified that he was aware Matthew had sunk into depression during that period. According to Russell, Matthew was overly ecstatic about his future life and was particularly enthusiastic about raising all 3 kids. However, given the unstable situation, Russell cautioned Matthew that he needed to take precautions to safeguard himself and remove any firearms from the house. In 2006, after the hockey season came to an end, Matthew turned to online gambling, which led to significant financial losses. His family and friends soon became aware that he was struggling with his mental health, as he was clearly unwell and depressed. At the urging of his loved ones, Matthew sought medical attention from a doctor, who subsequently prescribed him antidepressant medication. By Memorial Day weekend, Russell Harry had become very worried about Matthew's physical health. After enlisting Matthew's help to move a motor from one boat to another, Russell noticed some alarming changes. Matthew, once very strong, had now gained weight and was sweating excessively. He was also complaining of back pain and felt he had lost his strength. Russell urged Matthew to see a doctor and even recommended a specific physician, Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew saw Dr. Mandat on July 26, 2006. During this visit, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to know which doctor he was supposed to see. At the appointment, Matthew complained about back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help pass the stones and alleviate the associated pain. On July 30th, Matthew phoned his father to share the news that he had purchased a fishing rod for his daughter and was eager to take her and his father on a fishing trip in the near future. His father reported that Matthew sounded enthusiastic and was looking forward to their outing. Later that same evening, Matthew attended a party hosted by Russell, who would later testify that Matthew's physical appearance was alarming. He had put on even more weight, was sweating excessively, and struggled to walk without support. Additionally, Matthew complained of severe back pain. Later that evening, Holly reached out to Matthew's father to inform him that she had called 911 because Matthew was in distress. The father had a brief conversation with his son over the phone and found him to be confused and extremely upset. Following the ambulance's arrival, Matthew was rushed to Parma General Hospital due to suspected organ failure. It was eventually discovered that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and the doctors diagnosed him with metabolic acidosis, a condition where his blood had become excessively acidic. Dr. Mandad, a member of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance, such as methanol or antifreeze. He and the team questioned Holly, who was present, about the possibility of Matthew having swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol. However, she denied that Matthew had taken anything. On July 31, 2006, Matthew Podek passed away in the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandad's testimony, metabolic acidosis is typically caused by respiratory problems. However, that was not the cause in this case. Dr. Mandad clarified that ethylene glycol is another possible cause of metabolic acidosis, which is what happened here. Matthew's death was devastating to his family and friends, but Holly seemed unaffected. Rebecca Vega, Holly's friend, testified that she had reached out to Holly to offer support in the days that followed Matthew's death. Vega accompanied Holly to the funeral home to help make arrangements and was struck by Holly's complete lack of emotional response, neither sadness nor shock. Matthew's father stated that during the wake, he had to request Holly McFeature to enter the room where the casket was located so that she could receive visitors. However, she appeared to be emotionally numb, as if she felt nothing. Similarly, Russell Harry described Holly's behavior as if she was attending a celebration, completely unaffected by the recent events. A remarkable detail surfaced shortly after. The day following Matthew's death, August 1st, Holly used an ATM to withdraw cash using Matthew's bank card. Furthermore, she wrote checks in his name, effectively draining his bank account. Holly was subsequently arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery after Matthew's mother notified the authorities about the suspicious activity. In the end, Holly agreed to pay restitution and received a 1-year probation sentence. Her family claimed she had only been trying to obtain money to support the couple's children in Matthew's absence. Holly McFay was listed as a beneficiary on Matthew's life insurance policy, but the payout was relatively small, totaling just $10,000, which she received 2 weeks after his death. During a visit to Holly's home, her friend Rebecca Vega noticed cleaning solvents left out in the open in the kitchen, which she found concerning given the presence of young children. When Vega inquired about the substances, Holly explained that one of the items was antifreeze, which Matthew had used to winterize his boat. Matthew's best friend, Russell, testified that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer who had known Holly McFee since 2002, would often visit her house for coffee and conversation. He'd typically call ahead to avoid interrupting another man's visit. One day, he called to check if he was catching her at a bad time, and she told him not to worry about it anymore, explaining that Matthew had passed away the previous week. The officer was struck by her casual tone, which seemed careless and heartless to him. After Matthew's death, Holly had his computer handed over to a friend who then removed certain content from the hard drive. She also cut up his clothes to make a quilt, which meant that his father and brother were left with no clothing items to remember him by. 6 weeks later, Holly started dating Charles Lipom, a police officer from Cleveland. At first, she told him that her ex-boyfriend had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story after the autopsy results were released in January 2007, revealing that Matthew Podak's system contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, the active ingredient found in antifreeze. Holly confided in her new lover, Charles Lipom, that Matthew might have intentionally taken something to end his life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew Podak's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether it was an accident, suicide, or homicide. Holly also told Sean Walsh that Matthew had died in an industrial accident, suggesting that a colleague might have poisoned him out of jealousy due to his privileged position as the boss's nephew. However, Matthew's family suspected that the person responsible might have been someone within their inner circle. In 2007, after Holly moved away, detectives visited her former house and seized 2 bottles of antifreeze from the garage, as documented in the police report. Later that year, following her breakup with Charles Lipom, Holly met Jameson Kennedy at the bar where she worked. This was in the spring of 2008. Notably, Holly did not share any information about Matthew's death with Jameson. It is worth mentioning that Jameson Kennedy had a substantial criminal record and struggled with alcohol and drug abuse. One day in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were together, drinking and intimate, when Holly became emotional and started discussing Matthew. She broke down in tears, saying she wanted to escape the situation and leave Cleveland behind. She expressed regret over what had happened. Jameson asked her what she was sorry about, and Holly confided that she had tampered with Matthew's drinks, causing him to fall ill over time and eventually leading to his death. Jameson was unsure if she was telling the truth. Following Holly's confession, Jameson met with an old friend, Santiago Feliciano, a lawyer. Jameson shared Holly's admission with Santiago, who advised him to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. After Jameson discussed Holly's confession with her, he called her to clarify the details. But during their phone conversation, Holly vehemently denied ever harming Matthew, accusing Jameson of misquoting her. She insisted she never told him about putting anything in his drink and would never do such a thing. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their relationship. Jameson accused Holly of cheating on him on November 8, 2008, and confronted her at her house to discuss his suspicions. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived, Jameson attacked them, leading to his arrest and charge of assault. Jameson Kennedy was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting the officers. Not only that, but after his arrest, he also informed the police about Holly's alleged confession. He refused to protect the person responsible for his own arrest. As a result, more and more evidence pointed to Holly McPhee's involvement in Matthew Podolak's death. The police initially investigated Matthew's death in 2007, following the release of the autopsy report. However, they did not initially suspect foul play, which led to a lengthy delay in the case. Let's examine the autopsy report in more detail. As a seasoned forensic pathologist and medical examiner with over 10 years of experience, Dr. Galita's job involved performing autopsies and determining the causes and nature of death. With more than 3,500 autopsies under his belt, he was well equipped to conduct the autopsy on Podolak, which he did the day after Podolak's death. 6 months after the incident, in January 2007, the autopsy report detailing the findings was released. The report, which was signed by the doctor and the county coroner, Dr. Elizabeth Balge, concluded that Tupac's death was caused by chronic intoxication due to ethylene glycol, although the manner in which this occurred remained undetermined. Dr. Galita explains that the ethylene glycol Matthew Podolak ingested entered his bloodstream and was quickly metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase in his liver. This enzyme facilitates certain chemical reactions in the body. The resulting metabolite was converted into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. A large quantity of these crystals accumulated in Matthew's kidneys, hindering their proper function. Dr. Galita stated that Matthew's flank pain, which began in May 2006, was caused by crystals in his kidneys. An examination of Matthew's kidneys revealed not only damage, but also signs of the kidneys attempting to heal. Additionally, Dr. Galita discovered crystals in Matthew's heart and brain and diagnosed him with severe acute myocarditis, an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. According to Dr. Galita, Matthew's myocarditis could not have developed from a single instance of ethylene glycol ingestion, but rather required at least 3 weeks to develop. Furthermore, Dr. Galita ruled out the possibility that Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Dr. Galita reached the conclusion that Matthew's death was caused by long-term poisoning from ethylene glycol. She believed that this poisoning happened due to a series of acute, but non-fatal, intoxications that occurred over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends stated that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would often bring to work in a thermos or in its original packaging, whether it was a half-gallon or whole-gallon container. According to his friend Michael Mahal, Holly McPheecher would occasionally bring Matthew lunch at work, and it would always come with a half-gallon or whole-gallon container of iced tea. In August 2007, the police collected 2 bottles of antifreeze, one from Peak and one from Saturn, from the garage of McPheecher's former home. This was 3 years after she had moved out, and also after the autopsy results had been released in 2010. The coroner's report was later amended, and Dr. Frank Miller, the then county coroner, signed off on the updated document. Although the cause of death remained the same, the amended report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide, concluding that Podolak's death was a result of chronic ethylene glycol intoxication and was indeed a homicide. 6 years after Matthew Podolak's death, the authorities finally decided to arrest Holly McFeature in connection with his passing. In July 2012, they charged her with 2 counts: aggravated deprivation of Matthew's life and contaminating a substance for human consumption or use. Matthew's older brother, Mark Podolak, revealed that his family had long suspected McFeature's involvement in his brother's death, citing her unusual behavior. She didn't seem like someone who was grieving or about to lose a loved one. The investigators believed that Holly had been secretly adding antifreeze to Matthew's cold raspberry tea over a period of weeks or even months. She pleaded not guilty to the charges and appeared in court in 2013. The case against Holly rested solely on circumstantial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution called 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, Dr. Thomas Mandat, Matthew's doctor, and several police officers involved in the investigation. These witnesses testified about Holly's behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a working boat since 2004, so he had no reason to use antifreeze for that purpose. Holly's lawyers claimed that Matthew's family and friends were convinced of her guilt and immediately launched a vigorous campaign targeting law enforcement agencies to ensure she was brought to justice after his death. The state's primary witness was Dr. Galita, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Matthew's body. During his extensive testimony, Dr. Galita explained how he arrived at the conclusion that Matthew had been subjected to chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months. He pointed out that he discovered crystals in Matthew's kidneys and cardiac myocarditis, both of which can be caused by exposure to ethylene glycol. He ruled out other possible causes of myocarditis, including bacterial, fungal, and viral infections. Furthermore, Dr. Galita testified that if Matthew had experienced a single acute exposure to ethylene glycol, myocarditis would not have developed. Galita clarified why he altered the original autopsy report 3 years later. At the time in 2007, the coroner's office lacked sufficient information to conclude that the death was a result of intentional life deprivation, so the manner of death was initially classified as undetermined. The testimonies of other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings on the cause of death. Matthew's friends testified that Podolak's health started to decline in the spring of 2006, and he was diagnosed with kidney stones in July of that year, with his health continuing to deteriorate afterwards. As for the relationship between Podolak and McFeature, the state's witnesses stated that it had become increasingly volatile. Matthew seemed fearful, and one of his friends even advised him to take his weapons out of the house, which he did. Holly's lawyers claimed their client was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew, who was struggling with depression due to online gambling losses, work issues, and communication problems with his young child, intentionally took a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense also argued that Matthew died from a single dose, rather than multiple doses taken over several weeks or months. To support this, they presented Dr. Robert Bucks, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. He testified that Matthew suffered from acute poisoning, which indicated a one-time ingestion of ethylene glycol and suggested that Matthew wanted to end his life. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's finding of myocarditis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He also stated that a person can have myocarditis without ethylene glycol poisoning, and that flank pain is not a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. Additionally, Dr. Bucks claimed there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning. The state presented evidence that despite struggling with depression, Matthew was dedicated to being a good father to his children and had made plans with them as recently as the day before his death. Additionally, There was evidence that he had sought medical help for both his mental and physical health issues. One key witness at the trial was Jamison Kennedy, who both asserted that Holly had confessed to them that she had mixed something into Matthew's drinks. Kennedy was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers. He repeated his claim that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death, but Holly denied making such a statement. Despite Kennedy's questionable credibility, the court transcript shows that Sergeant Michael Quinn testified that when Kennedy initially told the authorities about Holly's confession, there was no public knowledge that Matthew had died from ethylene glycol poisoning. This suggests that Kennedy's information did not come from elsewhere, contradicting Holly's claim. Holly claimed that Kennedy had given her a choice: either receive leniency in her criminal case or exact revenge on her. After deliberating for 3 days, the jury delivered a verdict on August 28, 2013, finding Holly guilty on all counts. The court subsequently sentenced her to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This case relied solely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies. In your opinion, was Holly truly guilty? Is it plausible that Matthew intentionally consumed antifreeze for 3 months in an attempt to harm himself? Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. On the morning of September 12, 2012, a local resident named Orlando was hurrying home after a lengthy night shift at a gas station. He had promised his wife that he would take their young daughter Maria to daycare. Loud music played in the car to keep him awake as the trees along the road swiftly passed by one after another. As he emerged from a sharp turn, he saw black smoke. Orlando slowed down. Smoke was billowing from a nearby parking lot where a car was engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped, ran to take a closer look, but couldn't get close because of the fire. 4 minutes later, when the firefighters arrived at the scene, the car was completely burnt out. The arriving police cordoned off the area with safety tape to keep the gathering onlookers at a distance. The place was quite deserted so early in the morning, and there were no witnesses nearby who could describe the incident's exact moment. Upon examining the scene, a charred body was discovered. The police had to identify the victim and determine the causes of this tragic death. There were no signs of a car accident or skid marks found nearby. Similarly, no tire tread marks from another vehicle were found. The police's initial theory was that the death was caused by a car self-ignition or spontaneous combustion due to malfunctions. A lengthy investigation and multiple expert analyses were ahead. The remains were transported to the forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death of the deceased. Fragments of the burned vehicle were also delivered to the forensic laboratory to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began their investigation by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. Forensic experts quickly identified the deceased. She was a 23-year-old local resident, Catherine Wells Burr. On the same day, a report of a missing person was filed by Rafal Novak concerning the disappearance of her. According to Rafal Novak's report, he left for work at 5:30 a.m., while his girlfriend Catherine was still sleeping soundly at home. Although they worked for the same company, his shift started 2 hours earlier. When Catherine did not show up for work after this time and Rafal could not find her at any of places, he contacted the police. The investigation began. The police interviewed the victim's parents and sister, as well as Rafal Novak, who reported her missing, and all her colleagues and friends. Gradually, by piecing together information about the last days and subsequently the years of the young woman's life, they managed to reconstruct a sequence of events that led to her tragic demise. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989. Her father and mom, Phil and Jane Wells Burr, in the United Kingdom. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister named Lynn. During the summer of 2010, while on a university break, Catherine met one of the employees, 31-year-old Rafal Novak on a new vacuum cleaner production line. The tall, ruggedly handsome blonde quickly caught Catherine's eye. He was an immigrant from Poland with a former wife and son back home. About 4 years prior, he had moved to England in search of a better life. Catherine and Rafal soon started dating. Initially, they met for lunch at the cafe on the production site, but these lunches quickly turned into romantic dinners. Rafal courted Catherine beautifully, gifting her lovely bouquets, taking her to movies, and going for walks. Rafal opened up to Catherine, sharing his past life and reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting heart let the blonde man in completely. Their relationship progressed so swiftly that within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafal to her parents. They joyfully welcomed their daughter's choice into the family, hopeful for the couple's future happiness. Soon, the lovers were planning their wedding. In 2011, Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University and landed a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the company that manufactures Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly advanced in her career, providing good job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine was intelligent and well-educated. She always knew how to approach people, was concerned with her colleagues' problems, and was very attentive to those around her. Her kind gaze and radiant smile endeared her to people who held the young leader in high regard. Catherine Wells Burr's career was on a fast track to success. Her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafal Novak, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Despite their financial well-being, the house was bought on a mortgage, for which the young couple secured insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. Youth, successful careers, and love. It seemed they had everything needed for happiness. Yet, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a dividing line in their lives, changing everything from before to after. The investigation pressed on, uncovering new and unfamiliar facts about the lives of Catherine and Rafal. Over time, the veil of deceit that had enveloped their relationship from the start began to lift. 29-year-old Rafal Novak left behind a wife and child in Poland, fleeing to escape significant debts. He relocated to the UK, where he met Anna Lagwinowicz. Since 2008, they maintained a close relationship, then Catherine came into the picture for a while. Rafal saw both women, but ultimately he chose Catherine Wells Burr, seeing her as a more viable option for a family and financial stability. While Catherine genuinely dreamed of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family, Novak was plotting a scheme to end her life, intending to leave himself and his mistress, Anna Lagwinowicz, with the life insurance payout and the large house, a significant portion of the funds for which had been contributed by Catherine. The plot of this crime was meticulously planned and executed with even greater cruelty and cold-bloodedness. On the day of her disappearance, after waiting a few hours, Rafal approached Catherine's boss to inquire about her whereabouts, feigning sincere panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives. Catherine was not found at her parents' home, nor at her own, and her car was missing as well. Rafal recalled that she had been receiving threatening letters from a certain mentally unstable admirer for some time. Following this, her family contacted the police. The family was in the living room of the young couple's house, awaiting her return, when they were informed that a burning car with a body inside had been found. Rafal mentioned that the evening before her disappearance was entirely normal. The couple had gone for a walk after work, stopped by a store for groceries, had dinner, and then went to bed together after watching some television. Catherine did not appear scared or disturbed. However, a more detailed investigation proved that her death occurred earlier. Catherine was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while she was sleeping. Her lifeless body was then placed in the car, taken a short distance from the house, and callously set on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Yet Rafal Novak had a solid alibi. He was at work from 5:30 a.m., and according to him, Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rafal was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly altering the case's direction. Thus, Rafal Novak became the prime suspect in the murder of Catherine Wells Burr. Evidence allowed for Novak to be detained pending further investigation. Rafal claimed that Catherine was being pursued by a stalker who had repeatedly written to her and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, it was revealed that Catherine indeed had accounts on several adult websites, indicating a hidden side of her life unknown to her close ones. Intimate photos and flirtatious exchanges with men were found, along with a letter from a secret admirer. However, no matter how long you try to twist the truth, it always comes to light. In an attempt to mislead the investigation and direct it towards a false trail, Rafal forgot to destroy the evidence proving his direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Importantly, this provided the prosecution with a motive. Upon examining Novak's phone, investigators discovered that he never ceased communication and meetings with Anna Logvinovich. They actively met over the last few months, and it was also found that the man had a financial interest. Shortly before Catherine's demise, they both insured their lives for a sum of £123,000, with Catherine and Rafal being the sole beneficiaries of the insurance contracts and recipients of the payouts. The receipt of a substantial life insurance sum emerged as the primary motive in the case regarding Catherine's demise and the arson of her car to confuse the investigation. Police discovered that on the day of Catherine's disappearance, she sent a message to Anna Logwinowicz's phone. Surveillance cameras also revealed that a few days before the crime, Anna and her uncle filled a full canister of gasoline at a gas station, suggesting their potential involvement in the case. 32-year-old Anna Lagwinowicz and her 38-year-old uncle, Tadeusz Dmitryshin, became suspects in the complicity of intentional crime and arson to conceal evidence. The crime was meticulously planned over several months by the trio. They prepared thoroughly for the act, creating accounts on pornographic websites, uploading photoshopped images of Catherine, and fabricating and saving exchanges with various men to lead the investigation astray with a false trail. When Rafal and Anna realized it was futile to deny the irrefutable evidence, they started blaming each other. The conspirators wove a web of deceitful lies around an honest and cheerful young woman. They created fake online profiles for her on websites used by people seeking casual sexual encounters, and went to great lengths to conceal their crime, not only setting her body on fire, but also fabricating a completely fictitious backstory for her. They intended to depict Catherine as a promiscuous woman with many secrets and desires. One of the conspirators sent a text message from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day of her death to a fictional person, suggesting she was headed to meet him. However, forensic experts determined that when the fire started in the car, Catherine was wearing only her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have chosen for a meeting with a man. The police also discovered that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the only pillowcase had been washed and was hanging on a clothesline, leading them to believe she was suffocated in Anna Logwinowicz's car. Detectives found a SIM card linked to the number Catherine was supposed to have texted that morning in Anna's apartment trash bin, and they also found notes she had written seeking inspiration for messages supposedly sent by the mysterious person. As soon as Novak and Lainovich realized the game was up, they both claimed that Catherine's demise was the act of a hired criminal. A week before the trial began, Anna asked a fellow inmate to secretly pass on a fake confession from an imaginary hitman who claimed Novak paid him £20,000 sterling to end Catherine's life. The story penned by Lainovich might have offered a chilling insight into what happened to their victim, according to this fictional hitman. Rafal Novak played the role of a loving boyfriend perfectly in the days leading up to Catherine's demise, holding hands and kissing her in front of family members. He even told her mother, Jane, that he had lost his world and his future. Rafal Novak refused to acknowledge his involvement in the young woman's death and went further, telling her mother, Jane Wells Burr, that her daughter was receiving emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could, to complete the narrative. He even claimed she spoke of taking her own life. Worse still, Novak let the distraught Wells family parents comfort him, who believed he was also mourning the young woman he loved. Rafal's acting was so convincing that Catherine's mother, Jane, hugged him after her death and allowed him to call her Mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back. The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The jury heard during the trial that the three defendants hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 sterling and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000 sterling, following Catherine Wells Burr's death. The court was told that Rafal Novak showed no emotion when police discovered the woman's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th. Anna Lagwinovich, who often shook her head and laughed on the defendant's bench when Novak suggested she was responsible for the crime, refused to take the witness stand. Dmitry Sheen also did not testify in his defense during the trial. Judge told the defendants that the murder was a terrible, merciless crime, cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. None of the three showed any emotion during the sentencing. Judge Justice Sharp sentenced the three Polish nationals to mandatory life sentences with a minimum of 32 years in prison without the possibility of early release. The judge expressed heartfelt sympathy for Catherine's parents. They could never have known that behind the facade presented to them by Rafal Novak was a person devoid of remorse and decency. It was all about the money. Novak and Catherine had no ties binding them. They were not married, nor did they have children. The crime against Catherine was motivated by money, selfishness, and greed. While in the case of Anna Lagwinovich, it stemmed from jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Her mother wept in the courtroom as her statement was read, which said Catherine was a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing. She had a bright and promising future with so much potential. Her parents, Phil and I, were immensely proud of the young woman she had become. The manner of Catherine's passing, a cruel and calculated act of villainy, and the hatred shown to her, will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Now, she considers Rafal Novak an evil person who should spend the rest of his life behind bars. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they took him into their home, and he became like a son, but he betrayed them all during the trial. Rafal Novak, covered in tattoos, wept in the witness box, insisting he had no part in the demise of his true love. A father of one, who has a wife and a teenage son back in Poland, told the jurors that everyone is blaming him for something he never did. The court heard that Novak showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine Wells Burr's body in her burned car. Her mother, Jane Wells Burr, told the jurors that he didn't even mention Catherine, instead asking for a steak dinner after his initial release from police custody. Mrs. Wells Burr said that as soon as they bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy, her daughter's fate was sealed. She told the police that her life had a bounty on it, and indeed, she had signed her own death warrant the moment she signed the mortgage. Thus, 31-year-old Rafal Novak, a factory worker, was found guilty of the crime against his girlfriend, having suffocated her with a pillow while she slept. Afterward, he orchestrated a conspiracy with his secret lover, 32-year-old Anna Lagwinovich, and her uncle, 38-year-old Tadeusz Dmytryshin, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share in the house. It is believed that they also lived in Taunton, took Wells Burr's body in her Ford Focus to a remote location 7 miles from the city, and set the car on fire at 6 a.m., by which time Novak was already at work, providing him with a solid alibi. The jurors of the Royal Court of Bristol found Rafal Novak, Anna Lagwinovich, and Tadeusz Dmytryshin Shine, all originally from Poland, guilty of the crime. The crime was the culmination of months of secret meetings and phone calls between Rafal Novak and his Polish lover, Anna Lagwinovich, with Catherine completely unaware of her role in what turned out to be a love triangle. The accused spent months leading detectives on a false trail, creating fake profiles for the girl on adult websites, and sending her messages from a supposed mysterious lover. Following the verdict, the parents of the young woman who lost her life, Catherine Wells Burr, called for stricter immigration controls. Philip and Jane Wells Burr, who have separated after the tragic loss of their daughter, stated that Rafał Nowak, convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed entry into the UK if the immigration rules were as stringent as those in the United States of America. They blamed the European Union and stated that the UK needs to tighten its entry measures for foreign nationals. Family members of Catherine Wells Burr wept in court as the sentence was announced. The three perpetrators showed no emotion. The criminal trio received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, they have their whole lives ahead to ponder over criminal schemes, but without any chance to put them into practice. Thus, through their own efforts, the Polish immigrants traded their dreams of a successful and wealthy life for free prison cells. After the verdict was announced, the victim's mother spoke her final words, describing her daughter as a beautiful young woman. She expressed pride in her daughter's academic accomplishments, having earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. The mother described her daughter as determined, hardworking, and beautiful, and expressed the difficulty of continuing on without her. She lamented the loss of her daughter's great potential and the happiness she could have experienced, stating that her life was taken away and the family was robbed of her presence. When Manhattan resident and mother of two, Sheila Danby, was found deceased in her bathtub in December 2009, the police initially ruled her death an accident paid. However, about 6 months after the incident, suspicions led her family to exhume the woman's body. The subsequent autopsy revealed shocking new details, prompting the launch of a murder investigation. Sheila Danby was a New Yorker who owned a luxury apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side. At time of her death, she was in the process of divorcing Rod Sin, and they were embroiled in a custody battle over their two children, 9-year-old Anna and 3-year-old Miles. The ex-husband resided next door in the same complex, and they saw each other periodically. Their relationship was very strained. People who knew Sheila described her as a loving and caring mother who always prioritized her children above all else. They noted her friendly and gentle nature, along with her outer and inner beauty. She was highly intelligent and accomplished in every respect. Colleagues regarded her as a professional in her business. She was a successful Wall Street investment banker with several $1 million to her name. The sudden and tragic death of Sheila came as a shock to everyone who knew her. She had no known enemies at work or in her personal life at that time. She was single and not involved in any romantic relationships. Sheila devoted herself wholeheartedly to raising her children, which was her top priority. On the morning of that tragic day, December 31st, 2009, Sheila's daughter Anna woke up first and went to the bathroom. There she encountered a horrific scene. Her mother's body floating face down in the bathtub, with water tinged red with blood. Additionally, the closet door directly above the bathtub had been ripped off its hinges. Shocked and frightened, Anna ran out of the bathroom and immediately dialed her father's number, reporting that something terrible had happened to her mom. A man living nearby quickly rushed to the apartment and, upon entering the bathroom, found his former wife unconscious. This account encapsulates the professional background and personal tragedy surrounding Sheila Danby's untimely demise that spurred further inquiries into what truly transpired on that fateful day. Rod notified 911 and emergency services were dispatched to the address. Meanwhile, the man took her body from the bathtub, covered her with a blanket, and tried to give her CPR as instructed by the operator. He hoped to resuscitate the woman, but it didn't work. By then, medics had already arrived. When they entered the apartment, they found him still in the bathtub, not giving up on trying to save her. Medics checked her pulse. There was none. The body was cold. They pronounced the death of a 47-year-old woman as they observed signs of rigor mortis, determining that she had died about an hour earlier. Rod was grief-stricken. Crying with his children, he was deeply worried about what had happened. The medics had to sedate him because he was so distressed. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers examined the bathtub closely. They noticed a broken cabinet door and presumed it was related to the incident. It appeared that while reaching for something in the cabinet, she slipped and fell, hitting her head on the tub. This caused her to lose consciousness and drown. The head injury caused significant bleeding, explaining the red color of the water. Everything indicated an accident. There were no signs of forced entry or anything missing from the home. Given these factors, the case was closed as an accident. Due to their religious beliefs, Sheila's family requested no autopsy be performed once her death was ruled accidental. She was subsequently buried. However, following her funeral, doubts began to emerge among her loved ones about the nature of her sudden demise. Sheila's relatives highlighted inconsistencies. She never took baths with water due to time constraints and always showered instead, raising questions about why she would be found in a full bathtub. Additionally, they recalled she had undergone a keratin hair treatment just a day before her death, something that required keeping her hair dry for 3 days afterward. Given these circumstances, and considering how diligent Sheila usually was about following such rules, her loved ones began suspecting that her death might not have been an unfortunate accident. They wondered if foul play could have somehow been responsible for this tragedy. Sheila was known to avoid bathing in a bathtub. It went against her habits and couldn't be true. The suspicions grew so strong that her relatives asked the police to start an investigation into her death and requested that her body be exhumed. Initially, the police did not take these requests seriously because everything seemed obvious. A woman fell in the bathtub, hit her head, and died. However, the relatives managed to convince detectives to conduct an autopsy on Sheila's body. Her body was exhumed in April 2010 and sent for autopsy. This is when it was discovered that Sheila had been strangled before being placed in the bathtub. The forensic expert determined that she had been strangled with such force that her hyoid bone was broken and several ribs were also fractured. The head trauma wasn't serious and couldn't have caused her death. It appeared that Sheila died as a result of a violent struggle while being choked. The perpetrator might have had martial arts training and performed the chokehold with precision. Additionally, a forensic medical examiner who reviewed photos of the deceased noted fresh bruises on her arms and severe bruising around her eyes. In light of these new findings, law enforcement officials had no choice but to launch an investigation into Sheila's murder. The investigation was complicated by the fact that several months had passed since the tragedy, and no one initially suspected homicide, leaving no evidence at the scene. Detectives only had a few photos taken by officers who arrived for the initial report. Investigators believed that over those months, all traces would have likely been destroyed during bathroom cleanups. Nevertheless, despite significant doubts, they couldn't ignore this path forward. Upon arriving at the deceased woman's apartment for an inspection, police officers discovered that her children and husband resided there. The husband courteously permitted the detectives to enter and examine the premises. The CSIs proceeded to the bathroom, finding nothing of interest as expected. Rod mentioned that after his wife's death, the bathroom was meticulously cleaned multiple times with a cleaning agent, erasing all traces of blood. This thorough cleaning aimed to spare their children from distressing memories associated with their mother. The man had received authorization from police officers present on the day of the death to perform this cleaning. There were no witnesses to the crime. Only young children were in the apartment at the time. They were interviewed, but reported neither seeing nor hearing anything suspicious. Additionally, investigators observed no signs of forced entry into the house, suggesting that either the perpetrator possessed a key or was willingly let inside by someone. It was likely that the woman knew her killer, leading detectives to believe it was someone familiar to her. After speaking with her loved ones, they learned that Sheila had no enemies or ill-wishers, but had endured conflicts with her ex-husband over divorce and child custody matters. Sheila and Rod first met in 1998 while working on Wall Street. Sheila was already a successful professional then, serving as a vice president at a major financial company, while Rod was a novice investment trader getting started in the field. Despite this difference in experience, they quickly fell in love and began an intense romance, marrying just months later. Their swift marriage surprised many. Some friends even advised Sheila to take her time and assess her feelings before committing to someone new in her life. They worried he might not have genuine intentions, seeing how rapidly he captured her heart. However, blinded by love, Sheila ignored these concerns. The newlyweds moved into Sheila's luxurious apartment in New York's upscale Upper West Side neighborhood near Central Park. Before long, they welcomed a daughter named Anna into their lives. Though motherhood occupied much of Sheila's time initially, she soon returned to work and hired a nanny to assist with childcare duties. Sheila advanced to a fruitful career and eventually ran a company. Meanwhile, Rod struggled to find success in this endeavor despite his wife's support. Ultimately, he abandoned the job and turned his attention to pursuing his passions. Rod was passionate about martial arts, earning a black belt and actively participating in competitions. He convinced his wife that his future lay in sports, where he believed he could excel and become a coach. She believed him. However, Rod's focus shifted again, first to backgammon, then to various other hobbies that he changed frequently. His behavior exhibited signs of immaturity throughout this period, as he relied heavily on his wife for support and occasionally solicited funds from his parents. The couple welcomed a second child, a son. On the surface, they appeared content. However, Rod concealed a double life from his wife. In addition to experimenting with numerous hobbies, Rod engaged in extramarital affairs. Initially, he was involved with one woman, then two, but eventually expanded these activities. His address book contained around 20 women with whom he regularly met. Rod even created a schedule on his computer to manage these appointments without confusion. He connected with new acquaintances online and didn't shy away from meeting women of questionable character. Rod portrayed himself as a successful banker from Wall Street, attracting attention from women who aspired to secure such a promising partner. At home, however, he treated his wife poorly, often with insult and humiliation, reducing her to tears. But deception has its limits. Rod's deceit was ultimately uncovered by his own wife. Suspecting infidelity for some time, she hired a private detective who collected comprehensive evidence against him. The investigation revealed that Rod was simultaneously communicating online with 860 women. Confronted with the evidence, Rod did not deny it. He admitted that monogamy wasn't something he could uphold despite claiming love for her and seeing her as suitable for their shared life. He proposed an open relationship, a suggestion met with firm refusal from his wife, leading her to the conclusion that she could no longer endure his behavior. Exhausted by his antics and deceptions, she decided to file for divorce. In April 2009, the woman decided to kick her husband, Kay, out of their apartment, but felt pity and rented him a place not far from home. She thought he had nowhere else to go. Later, she regretted that decision deeply. After moving out, Rod realized that a divorce would mean losing all his assets as well as the lavish lifestyle he was accustomed to. He knew that without money, his new girlfriends would lose interest in him. Therefore, he began threatening Sheila that he would take her children away and pursue her relentlessly if they divorced. Sheila wanted to avoid trouble and contemplated how to resolve the problem with her ex-husband. She offered him a $250,000 payoff to make him go away. However, Rod rejected the offer and demanded more money along with full custody of their children. He intentionally threatened and manipulated Sheila by exploiting what mattered most to her, her children, despite knowing that he had no genuine interest in them. Sheila's lawyer advised against negotiating with him, confident that the evidence would sway the court in their favor. Rod's anger only grew due to Sheila's refusal to yield. He took drastic measures by informing her workplace that she was taking illegal substances. Even though everyone knew this was untrue, Sheila's supervisor couldn't ignore it and sent her for testing, which proved she was clean. When this plan failed, Rod reported his wife to the tax office, but even this investigation showed she was compliant with the law. Determined to cause more trouble, he began using his own set of keys to enter Sheila's apartment and create disturbances. Rod then falsely accused Sheila of molesting their 3-year-old son. The boy was referred to a child psychologist who confirmed nothing inappropriate had occurred. All this turmoil pushed Sheila towards a nervous breakdown due to the relentless problems caused by her ex-husband. In court, however, her lawyer successfully found Rod guilty of slander, and consequently, he was banned from communicating with both his children and his wife. The wife obtained a restraining order against Rod just a couple of days prior to her death. She communicated with her lawyer, expressing her intent to modify her will. She aimed to exclude her ex-husband, who was slated to receive $4 million. Instead, she wished to leave her entire fortune to her children. The lawyer agreed to implement the necessary changes and scheduled an appointment for the woman to sign the updated documents on January 1st. However, Sheila passed away before she had the chance to do so, which raised suspicions. The relatives found Sheila's sudden death peculiar and linked it with Rod's unusual conduct. They asserted that Sheila was deeply fearful of him. The nanny reported hearing Rod verbally abuse and threaten his spouse frequently. On one occasion, she even witnessed him push Sheila, causing her to fall. This led the nanny to fear how abusive he might have been in private. Investigators began suspecting Rod as well, since he appeared to have a clear motive. He seemed aware that Sheila intended to amend her will, which would remove him as a beneficiary. Consequently, he had a substantial financial incentive, benefiting both from an inheritance and a sizable $1 million life insurance policy on Sheila. In addition, detectives knew Rod possessed a key to his ex-wife's apartment, thus enabling him easy access. It was possible for him to commit the crime without obstacles and leave undetected. The way Rod allegedly left their young children alone with their deceased mother struck detectives as incredibly insensitive. This harrowing experience severely impacted Sheila's daughter, who required long-term psychological counseling due to the trauma. Despite these strong suspicions and precautions taken by investigators regarding Rod's potential involvement in Sheila's death, there was no direct evidence, such as DNA or fingerprints, linking him conclusively to the crime. Because of this lack of concrete evidence, the case remained contentious in terms of legal proceedings. Hence, police officers were reluctant to arrest or charge him formally. The investigation continued, and during this period, her insurance and inheritance were suspended. A new custody trial for the deceased's children began as well. Rod sought custody to gain access to his wife's finances through the children. However, her parents strongly opposed this because they believed Rod was at fault for their daughter's death. Additionally, Shell's words revealed that Rod disliked children, mistreated them, and frequently beat them. This was corroborated by the children during the trial. Even his own parents testified against him, accusing him of abusing the children and stealing $80,000 from them. Consequently, custody of the children was awarded to the parents of the deceased. In the meantime, Rod found himself without support and for the first time had to fend for himself. Lacking any means of livelihood, he secured a job as a debt collector. His aggressive tactics instilled fear in debtors who lodged complaints against him. Ultimately, his career in debt collection did not flourish, and he was terminated from his position. As time passed, the police struggled to find solid evidence against Rod. This case might have remained unresolved had one of Rod's former lovers not come forward in 2015. The woman finally decided to inform the police that Rod had confessed to her about murdering his wife. According to her, Rod's greed for his wife's money drove him to commit the act. He showed no interest in the children, except as a means to gain financial benefit through custody. Additionally, she provided shockingly new information. Rod had planned to kill his late wife's parents as well, and disguised their deaths as accidental events in order to regain custody and access his deceased wife's money. However, all his plans unraveled one by one. At one point, he even considered involving his daughter, who was a teenager at that time. In the realization of the plan, he tried to convince her that charges of harassment should be brought against her grandfather. But the girl categorically refused to participate in this. To prove her words, the former mistress presented the police with voice messages sent to her from Rod's cell phone. Now the police had new evidence. Based on the testimony of his mistress and these reports, Rod was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife in November 2015. This news came as a blow to Rod. He was confident of his impunity and planned to get away with murdering his wife, taking all her millions with him. The trial began in 2019, during which Rod denied all the allegations against him. He denied planning the murder, being in his wife's apartment that morning, killing her, and planning to kill her parents to get close to the money. On the prosecution side, there were numerous witnesses who spoke about Rod's abuse of his wife and children, as well as his affairs on the left. They discussed his intentions to gain access to all of his wife's money and control over financial matters in the event of a divorce. According to the prosecutor, Rod was motivated by money to get rid of his wife. He had a key to the apartment and knew how to perform a chokehold, which was used to kill her Sheila. Though there was no direct evidence against him in this case, there was enough circumstantial proof. A mistress appeared at trial and testified against Rod. This finally convinced the jury that he was guilty. Rod's children encouraged them to ask the court not to send their father to prison, given they had already lost one parent and did not want to lose another. The 12-year-old son spoke at trial, and although the 18-year-old daughter was absent, she relayed a plea asking for mercy for their father. However, these requests did not sway the jury. They found him guilty. Rod was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. Currently, he is incarcerated at Ada Correctional Institution in Ada, New York.
In the summer of 2003, the body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne was found in a field near Tremont, Illinois. Sabrina was a black female who was known to support a drug habit with prostitution. Sabrina had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The original autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leaving some of the detectives to believe she overdosed. One detective, however, felt uneasy about that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies were found in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the next year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was found partially clothed and lying face down in the snow. She had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy showed that she had multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology showed that she had fatal levels of cocaine in her blood. At this point, police were not ready to call this a murder or entertain the idea of a serial killer preying on black drug-addicted prostitutes. In October of 2004, 32-year-old Shakonda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Shakonda was known to disappear at times, but when she didn't come back after several weeks, her family reported her missing. Shirley Ann Trapp was also reported missing in the late summer of 2004. She was seen 3 days before she was reported missing. Tamara Walls was reported missing in September of 2004 after not being seen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females known to support a crack cocaine habit with prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and woman. Her longtime partner searched for her but only was able to determine she had been with a man named Larry. Her boyfriend, and father to her 7 daughters and 1 son, describes Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura seemed to struggle with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was found nude on the side of the road. Linda, like the other women, was known to be part of the drug scene in Peoria. At this point, police had determined there was likely a serial killer stalking black females in the Peoria area. A task force was formed, which one detective states would have occurred much quicker if the victims had been white females. While police desperately searched for the killer, they kept a close eye on women in the community at risk. Despite their efforts, on October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for their mother's safety, as she had known many of the women who had been killed or disappeared from central Illinois. Brenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved difficult to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the lead they were waiting for in December of 2004. 35-year-old Vicki Bomer was arrested for theft. From jail, she told authorities that she thought she could help them find the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. She believed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Bomer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home where they shared alcohol and drugs. Once she was intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Bomer was able to escape. Police were at first skeptical, as Bomer asked for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. Why hadn't she reported this back in July? Why wait until she was under arrest? Vicki Bomer claimed she was scared of being arrested for outstanding warrants, which is why she did not come forward in July 2004. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, so detectives decided to take a look at the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois, on July 8, 1966. He served a 2-year stint in prison at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to Larry's family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. Larry became more angry and violent and began using drugs. Larry had an injury, which started an addiction to prescription opioids and later crack cocaine. He also developed an addiction to pornography, preferring videos with black women. Larry lived with his mother in a tiny guest house behind her home. Larry enjoyed gardening, creating a beautiful garden bed of flowers for his mother. When the police arrived at Larry's home following the tip, they noticed the beautiful flowers in the garden. Larry was placed under arrest for the unlawful restraint of Vicki. They questioned Larry about the murders, but he denied having any information about the murdered and missing women. Throughout the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to take one of the cigarette butts and test it for DNA, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. Larry declined to give DNA voluntarily. Police searched Larry Bright's home on January 20, 2005. The investigators dug up the garden, finding several small bone fragments and ashes that were later determined to be human. When the police questioned Larry again, they told him they were digging up his mother's flowers. At this point, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders. He even led investigators to the remains of some of his victims. Larry explained that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sabrina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to his home, which he shared with his mother. He claimed the two drank and used cocaine before having consensual sex. Larry said he did not intend to kill Sabrina, but he became enraged, thinking Sabrina was trying to rip him off. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was found. Larry confessed to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004. Again, he used drugs and alcohol with his victim. He stated that he once again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara. He claimed he caught Barbara stealing from him. He dumped her body along the road where she was found the next day. The prosecution believed that after the first two murders, Larry developed a bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, he said, "I knew them I would kill the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lauer. He burned her body in his backyard burn pit, burying their remains in his mother's yard. He said he wanted to destroy the bodies to avoid getting caught. He confessed to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains. Her jawbone was found in the backyard. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley in trap. Shakonda Thomas had the same fate after being picked up by Larry Bright. He burned the woman and buried the ashes in the yard. Because of his attempts to cremate his victims, he was nicknamed the Bone Crusher. Larry said that he attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenna Irving as well, but the attempts were unsuccessful due to the weather. He dumped both women along the side of the road. Larry was facing the death penalty following his January 2005 arrest. In an attempt to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid the death penalty, Larry Bright pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide on May 30, 2006. Bright's murders were not considered racially motivated, but detectives believe he was just attracted to black women. He is one of the very few serial killers who chooses victims outside of his race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole, to be served concurrently. He was also given an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea deal, Larry will be required to serve 100% of his sentence with no parole consideration. Larry is currently housed at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that brings little peace to the families of his victims. The loved ones of Larry's victims want people to know that the women he killed were more than just drug addicts or prostitutes. They were people. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. The serial killer dentist of St. Louis, Clennon Engelman. Dr. Clennon Engelman was born on February 6, 1927, in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Engelman grew up on the south side of the city and felt a deep connection to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Dr. Engelman used his GI Bill to go to Washington University and become a dentist. He opened his dental office on the south side of St. Louis, serving the community he had always loved. Dr. Engelman, who went by Clen, was married to a woman named Edna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956. By 1958, both Clen and Ruth had remarried. Clen was operating his dental office and appeared to be successfully serving the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloodied man stumbling. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon passed from his injuries. These injuries were caused by a gunshot. No one could figure out why someone would shoot 28-year-old James Bullock. James Bullock was born on April 17, 1931, in DeSoto. He was raised in Shiloh, Illinois, by his grandparents and later his aunt after his parents passed away. According to an article from 1938, the then 7-year-old was living with his grandparents in 1938 and enjoyed attending school and fishing. James later served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and go to college. Back in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Clen Engelman. The two married, and 6 short months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed James was there 4 days before his murder, asking to be admitted because he feared for his life. His wife and aunt said this was not true, as the 3 had dinner together on that night. According to his widow and aunt, James was not afraid for his life, and they knew no one who would want him dead. However, Edna Ruth benefited greatly from her husband's death. Ruth had life insurance policies totaling $64,088. While under questioning, Edna Ruth made several weird statements, including telling the police she was married before, but her husband did not know. Who was she married to? Her husband's dentist, Dr. Clen Engelman. Edna Ruth had lied to James and his family and lied on the marriage application about being married before. Police questioned a local career criminal who was out on parole for an assault at the time of the shooting. They weren't able to tie him to the murder of James, but they did note he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth both refused to take a polygraph test and denied any involvement in the murder of James Bullock. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, refused to be questioned by the police. A patient provided an alibi for Dr. Engelman. However, another witness said that they tried to find someone at the office around the time and the office was empty. Edna Ruth invested part of the funds she received after becoming a widow into doctor. Been bored being a dentist, so he often ventured into other areas of business. This included buying a trike strip along with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had grown to be close friends with Eric and his wife Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the trike strip using dynamite to explode and then fill abandoned cisterns on the property. Eric was lying on his stomach near one of the cisterns when the dynamite exploded quicker than anticipated. Eric was killed instantly and found lying in the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Mr. Frey's wife had an insurance policy on her husband, which she invested part of into Dr. Engelman's practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Ida and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple shared a son, but Ruth hated the close relationship her husband had with a young woman who worked in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman offered to train Carmen to be a dental assistant in his office. Edna felt uncomfortable with the flirting between the doctor and his young assistant. Dr. Engelman, however, claimed he was trying to help people in his community. He hired Carmen's brother, Nick, as well at one point. Ruth was relieved when Carmen met a married man named Peter Holm. Just a few months later, however, Carmen and Eric were walking in a rural area in Pacific, Missouri. The couple were exploring an area known to have caves and scenic paths. A shot suddenly fired, hitting Peter in the head. Peter died instantly, and a hysterically Carmen flagged down the help. Nearby, police found an X on a tree made with tape. The area was familiar to locals as a hunting area, and police believed that the shot was accidental. Police believe someone was target shooting at the X and accidentally struck Mr. Holm. Carmen had a significant amount of life insurance on her husband, totaling $60,000. This is equivalent to around $300,000 in 2024. Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced soon after, at which time Dr. Engelman married young Carmen, whom he had known since she was a small child. His son lived with Edna, his ex-wife. Despite being married to Carmen, Dr. Engelman and Ruth still met regularly for sex. Dr. Engelman constantly had extramarital affairs, which included previous affairs with Carmen, Ruth, and even Sandy Fry, the wife of his business associate Eric Fry, who was killed by dynamite. Another of Dr. Engelman's affairs was with a patient named Barbara Doyle. On November 3, 1977, someone pretending to be from the farm girl walked up to the farmhouse owned by Arthur and Vernita Guswell in Everettsville, Illinois. Soon after entering the home, the elderly couple were attacked and both were shot in the head. The wealthy couple left $340,000 to their son, Ronald Guswell. Guess who Ronald Guswell was married to? Barbara Doyle. On April 4, 1979, less than 2 years after the murder of his parents, Ronald Guswell was found dead inside his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois. The man had been beaten and shot to death. He had been missing for 4 days when his body was found. Following her husband's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance in addition to several life insurance policies. The equivalent sum of money today would be nearly $1.7 million. Guess who she cut to? Dr. Glennon Engelman. Following the murder of Ronald Guswell, authorities were starting to notice the trend of connected deaths to Dr. Engelman. His patients and community, however, only saw a generous man committed to helping his community and its citizens. Dr. Engelman was not the greatest dentist, however. He often did a sloppy job of making casts for dentures and dental appliances, requiring the work to have to be redone by the dental lab several times. His business was struggling, however, and he soon found himself in debt with the dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera. Sophie Barrera owned a South St. Louis dental laboratory and had grown tired of waiting for Dr. Engelman to pay up by 1980. She filed a lawsuit against the doctor that was set to go to court just a few days after Sophie was murdered. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis. Shortly after, the vehicle exploded. Police found remnants of a bomb under her charred vehicle. Sophie had told her son before she was in fear of being killed. She believed Dr. Glenn Engelman was dangerous. Dr. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released. Police were certain he was responsible for Sophie's death, but they had to prove it. The public also wondered if the bombing was related to another bombing in the area that was carried out between two mob families fighting for control over St. Louis's labor unions. The evidence indicated, however, that this was not a mob hit. The number one suspect was the man who owed Sophie $15,000. Dr. Engelman had to be stopped, but the police weren't sure how to do it. Detectives soon began having conversations with Dr. Engelman's ex-wife and mother of his son, Ruth. Ruth told police nothing at first, but eventually started to talk. She explained that Dr. Engelman often bragged about killing people. He told her that he had a superpower. He was able to kill without remorse. He had admitted to killing Eric Fry, Peter Holm, and the Guswell family. It was his side hustle, killing for profit. Ruth agreed to help the police, but none of her testimony could be used in court because Dr. Engelman confessed to her while the two were still married. He was protected by spousal privilege. Ruth decided to wear a wire, however, and met up with Dr. Engelman to exchange their son and sometimes just to socialize. They were still having a sexual relationship despite Dr. Engelman's marriage to Carmen. She tried to get Dr. Engelman to confess to her again by asking direct questions. He didn't seem to take the bait at first, and Ruth feared he would kill her next. Ruth suggested police plant a bug in her bedroom and she would invite the dentist over for sex. Dr. Engelman was suspicious, however, and did not say anything that could lead to his arrest. Ruth then met him at a diner wearing a wire, and this time he commented on being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims. He admitted to the murders in great detail, providing just what police needed for an arrest. He explained that he found murder more sexually satisfying than sex. His ex-wife was given a new life in the witness protection program. Carmen, who was no longer married to the dentist, and her brother Nick were brought in for questioning to corroborate the allegations against Dr. Engelman. As possible co-conspirators, they asked for and were granted immunity to testify against the dentist. Carmen told quite the story. She said she was working for the dentist when he suggested she find someone with good benefits to marry. He told her about Eric Fry, whom he said he directed Sandy Fry to marry with all intentions of murdering the insurance proceeds. Soon after she was married, Carmen said Dr. Engelman told her where to go and made sure her husband was shot and killed. He staged it to look like a target shooting accident. Clement Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at Dr. Engelman's first trial, for which he was convicted of murdering Peter Holm and given 50 years in prison. The dentist then pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving a life sentence for that murder in Missouri, Dr. Engelman was back in clerk by 1985 in Illinois. In 1984, Robert Handy, a contact and acquaintance of Dr. Engelman, admitted to authorities that he had taken part in the murder conspiracy of the Guswell family. He implicated Dr. Engelman, who had bludgeoned Ronald Guswell and shot him, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Doyle. Dr. Engelman was given 3 life sentences for the Guswell murders. He also was convicted of federal mail fraud and given a 30-year federal sentence. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to kill her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged in the case due to lack of evidence. Barbara Doyle went on trial for the murder of her in-laws, Arthur and Vernita Guswell, and husband Ronald in 1985. The jury acquitted her of the murders of Arthur and Vernita but convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Ronald Guswell. Barbara Doyle was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 1985. She was granted parole in 2009. Dr. Engelman enjoyed his notoriety in Missouri, often comparing himself to legendary outlaw Jesse James. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, but the actual number is unknown. Unlike other serial killers, Dr. Engelman was inspired, at least in part, by greed. He also seemed to revel in his ability to not feel remorse. Dr. Engelman died of diabetes-related health issues in 1999 at age 72. He was incarcerated in Jefferson City at the time.